Chapter 2367. Only Qianmo was left standing in the meeting hall in a daze. Although today's matter was simple, it was really strange. It had nothing to do with the Imperial Thunder Sect, but in the end, it fell on the Imperial Thunder Sect's head. The strangest thing was that although the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect had died, their life spirit tablets were not damaged. According to Tu Hong's decisiveness in the video, such a situation would never happen. Hee. Even if they didn't die, what does it have to do with me? After thinking for a moment, Qianmo shrugged. After all, it was only a small team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Even the first team only had 7 people, and they were disciples of the Thunder Palace. Compared to thousands of disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect, it was nothing. Subsequently, Qianmo secretly inquired about the other sections. Unexpectedly, all the disciples of the other sects who died in Jinquan Mountain had their life spirit tablets damaged without exception. When he reported this to Qianlezi only frowned slightly to indicate that he understood, and did not say anything else. Qianlezi did not care about this matter even if Qianmo did not care about it. Therefore, the rewards of the 7 disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect were announced together with the rewards of the other Dao Sect cultivators in Sky Patrol City. Naturally, Tu Hong's name was at the top. After all, this was killing tens of thousands of sword cultivators. It was definitely a great merit. Although the Yanxi Prefecture in Sky Patrol City would announce the results of the battle every once in a while, and the Battle of the Spiritual Stone Vein had become the focus of everyone's attention. However, once the Battle of the Spiritual Stone Vein in Jinquan Mountain was announced, all the other battles were overshadowed. 5,000 Dao Sect cultivators, 30,000 disciples of Jinquan Mountain, 40,000 sword cultivators, nearly 30 illusory swordsmen. Just by looking at these numbers, not to mention the illusory swordsmen, it was enough to make all the cultivators speechless. Just as the Snow Region sage said, Tu Hong's generosity was too great. So great that even he was a little surprised. These results should only be achieved after the nascent soul cultivators and illusory swordsmen came out, but Tu Hong had done it 10 years earlier. Tu Hong's name instantly swept through the entire Sky Patrol City like a hurricane. It swept through the entire 3 cultivation countries and even reached the ears of the sword cultivators of the Huan country. Above the Blue Lake, Lu Ruochang of the Black Phoenix Sword Sect had a look of shame and anger on his face. He coldly looked at a white-haired swordsman not far from him. The swordsman's face was somewhat similar to Ling Yunwu's. His lips were slightly pursed, and he did not say a word. The swordsman also narrowed his eyes and stared at Lv Ruochang. Both of their gazes were like electricity, and sparks were about to fly. Ahem. A female swordsman not far from Lv Ruochang was failing sword zhuangruoling. Looking at the two of them, she coughed a few times and said, "Friend Lv Jianyu, friend Ling Jianyu, we are all swordsmen of the Sword Region. At this time, we should be united against the outside world. Why do we have to exhaust ourselves here? Humph, I don't want either." The one called friend Ling Jianyu was Ling Mayu of the Soaring Wind Sword Sect. He was Ling Yunwu's senior brother. He sneered and said, 10 swordsmen of the Soaring Wind Sword Sect and the swordsmen we invited were all buried in the spiritual stone mine of Mount Quanjin. I only said a few words, and friend Lv Jianyu actually gave me such a look. Why should I be nice to her? Humph, Ling Yunwu messed up the mission I gave him. He went to Mount Quanjin to look for clues. He encountered a great battle and died. It's fate. How can you blame me? Your nose is not your nose, and your face is not your face. Why are you throwing a tantrum at me? Do you know? Ling Yunwu lost my black silk wood and sword pouch. How big of a delay did he cause? Because of this, the beast cultivator's senior Qing Feng will lose his life. Moreover, more swordsmen will lose their lives. What you said is only a possibility. Our Soaring Wind Sword Sect has already paid for this with the lives of 10 illusory swordsmen. Ling Mayu said angrily. Swordsman, there's no need to argue. The short beast cultivator, Qing Feng, said with a bitter face. Swordsman Ling Yunwu died in Mount Quanjing. Presumably, the cultivator he was looking for also died. I'm afraid there's no hope for the sword pouch and black silk wood. We'll go to Chestnut Valley to look for the spirit-swallowing bugs. However, LVGNU, I'm not black silk wood. Even if I risk my life, I won't be able to find it in a short time. You have to be prepared. The great array of Mount Quanjing is actually so terrifying? Even Senior Huajian can't break it at will? Maybe the sword pouch and black silk wood are inside, Ruocheng said with a frown. Qin Jian of the Void Heaven Sword School said with a bitter smile. It's true. I personally went to check it. The spiritual roar inside is extremely powerful. At this time, even Senior Huajian will be injured. Even if the sword pouch and black silk wood are inside, I'm afraid they have already been destroyed. No wonder. The conference hall of the Yanxi Mansion would send a message through a disciple. Within 10 years, everyone will hide the great array of Mount Quanjing. Wait until the spiritual roar of the great array stops, or wait for Senior Huajian and the nascent soul cultivators to make a move. Ruocheng said thoughtfully. If they can handle it, why would they think of us? Yes, the cultivators of the Dao sect. I'm afraid they have some intention of delaying. Qin Jian also nodded. Anyway, we still have to pay close attention to Mount Quanjing. Alas, Senior Qing Feng, how much time do you need? Ruocheng knew this and looked at Qing Feng again. Qing Feng was born with a bitter face. After thinking for a while, his wrinkled face was filled with helplessness. I can't be sure about this. At least a few months, at most a few years. Even. I won't get anything. Yes, I understand. Ruocheng nodded and said to Qing Feng seriously. I'll have to trouble Senior Qing Feng with this matter. My sword domain will never forget Senior's contribution. In addition, I will also ask the sword friends of the 7 spiritual mountains to make a move. Good. Qing Feng nodded and said no more. Tu Hong. He is indeed vicious and merciless. Ruocheng gritted her teeth. Why haven't I heard of this person before? My sword domain's warriors have mostly won in the fight for the spiritual stone mines. It was only at this Mount Quanjing that we suffered such a huge loss. Close to 40,000 swordsmen. I don't even know how to explain this to the sword heads. LVGNU, you don't have to worry about it. Qin Jian laughed. The Dao sect's cultivators also lost close to 40,000, similar to our sword domain's losses. It's just that. It's because the sword friends of the Soaring Wind Sword sect went to help, that's why the losses were greater. Alas, that's right. Ruocheng had to admit that if not for the matter with Ling Yunwu, she definitely wouldn't be so angry. Following which, Ruocheng clasped her hands and said, Brother Ling, I'm really a little anxious, please forgive me. Ling Mayu saw that Ruocheng actually took the initiative to apologize and hurriedly returned the greeting. My Soaring Wind Sword sect has suffered heavy losses this time. I'm also angry. I was too rash. Haha, isn't that all right? Ling laughed. Our sword domain's swordsmen have always been honest with each other, 100 times better than the Dao sect's cultivators who scheme against each other. That's right. Qin Jian sneered. Tu Hong is just a golden core cultivator. I'll find an opportunity to kill him. That way, I'll be able to resolve my hatred as a swordsman. Brother Qin, you're right. Ling Moyu shook his head and said, It's a pity that this fellow has already entered the Yanxi Mansion's conference hall and won't easily leave the Sky Patrol City. I'm afraid it won't be easy to kill this fellow. And I know. I've fought with the Dao sect's cultivators for so long, I've learned some things. I'll think of a way. Qin Jian nodded. The Battle of the Spiritual Stone Mines was just a test. However, we also know that cultivators are treacherous and cunning. In the future, we still have to be more detailed in our plans. Don't let the cultivators beat us at our own game again. Ruocheng pondered for a moment, and discussed the next step with many swordsmen. The Huan Kingdom's swordsmen hated the battle at Mount Quanjing to the bone, and the battle at Mount Quanjin had attracted the attention of many swordsmen and cultivators. One must know that there were tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen's remains. There must be a lot of magical treasures left behind. If anyone could obtain some magical treasures from Mount Quanjin, it would be worth a lot of spiritual stones in e.g. Who wouldn't be jealous? But the strange thing was that the Yanxi Mansion's conference hall and the Huan Kingdom's sword cultivators had issued a ban. All cultivators and sword cultivators were prohibited from entering the 100-mile radius around Mount Quanjin. Once they were discovered, they would be killed immediately. Such a ban naturally couldn't stop the greedy cultivators. Even some sword cultivators secretly went there. The city guards and sword cultivators of the Sky Patrol City had a tacit understanding, each of them patrolling different areas at different times. After killing many cultivators and sword cultivators, the number of people who went to Mount Quanjin had decreased. As for whether there were any high-level cultivators who secretly went there, that wasn't something that the patrolling disciples would know. But one thing was certain, that Mount Quanjin's Great Array had no movement at all. If Mount Quanjin's Great Array didn't have any movement, then no one would disturb Xiaohua's forced cultivation. However, Imperial Thunder Sect's 10,000 Thunder Valley had caused a great disturbance. Today was Xiang Zhili's resting day. He was following Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian as they flew towards the sky of 10,000 Thunder Valley. Xiang Zhili was flying around his father and mother restlessly, and at the same time, he was asking some questions in a low voice. These questions were naturally not about his cultivation in Zhenlei Palace, but the simplified cultivation method of the dragon transformation art. The dragon transformation art was indeed broad and profound. Even someone as strong as Shui Shui had to spend a long time comprehending it under Xiaohua's guidance. How could Xiang Zhili be able to do it in one go? Usually, the little fellow was very cautious and never revealed anything. Only after he finished a day's worth of cultivation did he go into the quiet room to comprehend and cultivate the dragon transformation art alone. The questions that he had accumulated over the past month could only be found at this time to ask his parents. Furthermore, Xiang Zhili followed Xiaohua's instructions and didn't read out the complete cultivation method to Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian. He only told them the parts that he didn't understand and his own comprehension and doubts, allowing Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian to explain. This kind of happy situation was what Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian liked the most. Not only could they watch their beloved son grow up, but they could also enjoy the happiness of family. It was really rare. However, as Xiang Zhili's cultivation of the dragon transformation art deepened, Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian started to be surprised. Because Xiang Zhili's questions were becoming more and more profound, not only did they far exceed the knowledge of Qi refinement cultivators, but even more so, they far exceeded the cultivation of Dao sect cultivators. Furthermore, from Xiang Zhili's questions, Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian could faintly deduce the power of the dragon transformation art after successfully cultivating it. It was definitely several times stronger than the same level of cultivation -8. Chapter 2368. Xiang Yang, who had always been cautious, was somewhat anxious. Occasionally, he would express some thoughts in front of Yan Qinglian, wanting Xiang Zhili to stop a little and wait until Xiaohua returned. After all, having someone to guide him was completely different from not having anyone to guide him. But Yan Qinglian was extremely confident in Xiaohua, knowing that he would absolutely not do anything he wasn't confident in, especially when it came to her beloved son. Therefore, she always disagreed with Xiang Yang's caution. Just like today, after Xiang Zhili stopped Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian, his little mouth pouted, somewhat dissatisfied, but his eyes were filled with excitement. He activated the flying talisman and flew several zhang forward, looking left and right at the familiar scenery, even whistling the tune he had just learned. Xiang Yang transmitted his voice to Yan Qinglian. "Wife, I think it's better to let Lier stop a little. The thing he cultivates, even we, middle-stage foundation establishment cultivators, can't answer. If he continues to cultivate, won't there be a problem?" "Humph, middle-stage foundation establishment." Yan Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, You seem to be more than middle stage foundation establishment, right? Wife also noticed. Xiang Yang had a smile on his face. I've also caught up with you. If I cultivate bitterly for another 5 to 10 years, I'll definitely be able to accompany you into late-stage foundation establishment. Yes, from early-stage foundation establishment to late-stage foundation establishment. Whose credit is it? Yanqinglian was still all smiles as she said. Xiang Yang sighed and said, Alas, I know it's junior brother Zhao's credit, but you can't always mention junior brother Xiao every time you mention Lear. Admittedly, he's Lear's adoptive father, admittedly very powerful, but after all, he was in the middle of a great battle and wasn't in Myriad Thunder Valley. Didn't you hear junior brother talk about it? Yanqinglian said. Some things that Lear doesn't understand, of course we can answer, but if we let him comprehend it himself, it'll be even better for his cultivation. The problem is... Xiang Yang stamped his feet. This cultivation method is overbearing and strange. Is junior brother strange? Is junior brother overbearing? Yanqinglian said with conviction. But... The clumsy Xiang Yang was a little anxious. At this moment, several disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace flew over from the opposite side. The one in front was actually a late Golden Core stage disciple. Xiang Yang, Yanqinglian, and Xiang Zhili did not dare to be negligent. They hurriedly shut their mouths and stood in midair to respectfully salute. The Golden Core cultivator looked at the three of them, smiled, and raised his hand to indicate that he was leaving. They? What's the matter? Xiang Yang was puzzled. Who knows? Let's go back and ask Master. Yanqinglian replied with a strange expression on her face. All right. Xiang Yang scratched his head as if he didn't want to see her. In less than an hour, the cave abode was in sight. Xiang Zhili activated his flying talisman and rushed to the front. Xiang Yang opened his mouth, wanting to stop Xiang Zhili, but he didn't know what to say. Yanqinglian smiled wryly as she looked at Xiang Yang. Both of them flew towards the Immortal's cave. Xiang Zhili was the first to enter the Immortal's cave. He was still respectful as he walked quickly to Immortal's cave and bowed, saying that he had seen Grand Master. However, Immortal did not seem to be happy like before. Instead, he forced a smile on his face and asked him to stand up. Xiang Zhili felt that something was wrong. However, when he turned to salute Xue Minghui again, he was even more surprised. Xue Minghui's abdomen was slightly bulging, her face was slightly red, and there were tears in her eyes. Greetings, Grand Master! Xiang Zhili's heart trembled. After saluting respectfully, his gaze fell on Xue Minghui's abdomen. There was curiosity in his clear gaze. Thus, Xue Minghui was even more embarrassed. Immortal's face was also slightly unnatural, but it was sometimes covered by a touch of sorrow. Then, Xiang Yang and Yanqinglian entered the Immortal's cave. Obviously, they immediately felt the oppressive atmosphere in the Immortal's cave. Instantly, an extremely bad feeling rose from the bottom of their hearts. That's right, since the start of the war, the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples had also suffered casualties. Grievous news and obituaries were constantly sent back to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Xiang Yang and Yanqinglian naturally heard about it. How could they not know when they saw their master and mistress so sad? Xiang Yang and Yanqinglian did not have time to salute and hurriedly said, Master, is it, the two junior brothers? Then, the two of them did not dare to say more. They only looked at Immortal, afraid that they would get a definite answer from him. Immortal sighed helplessly and nodded slightly. Is it junior brother Xiao or junior brother Cui? Xiang Yang's heart was immediately filled with sorrow, and a sense of powerlessness welled up. The two of them. He could only say two words helplessly. Seeing two of his disciples die just like that, his heart was indeed like being stabbed by a knife. Impossible! Xiang Zhili's loud voice immediately rang out. Foster father is so powerful, how could he die? This is absolutely impossible. But then, his small hand covered his mouth, and his eyes darted around, as if he knew that he had revealed something. Alas! Immortal sighed helplessly and threw a jade archive in his hand to Xiang Yang, saying with a wry smile, "Not to mention Lear, who doesn't believe it, even your master and mistress don't believe it. The two children did not look like they died young. Especially Hongshin, no matter how you look at it, he looks like he will become someone great in the future." But the person who sent the message was a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace, and the message was also the Heavenly Thunder Palace Master's commendation order. It said that Xiao Hua and Hongshin sacrificed themselves for righteousness and fought with sword cultivators at the Spring Gold Mountain Spirit Stone Mine in Century City, killing tens of thousands of sword cultivators, including more than 30 golden core sword cultivators. Sacrificed themselves for righteousness? Xiang Yang was slightly stunned. In his mind, this term did not seem to be associated with Xiao Hua. Alas, 30 golden core swordsmen, ah. He sighed helplessly. Even if this old man went there, it would be impossible for him to survive, let alone Hongshin and Xiao Hua. Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian were certainly very confident in Xiao Hua, but when they heard that there were 30 golden core swordsmen, the two were also stunned. Yes, no matter how powerful Xiao Hua was, he could not be compared with golden core swordsmen, let alone 30 golden core swordsmen. When Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian saw the Jade Archive, their faces were even more ashen, and their faces were as ugly as Zhuo Minghui's. Alas, they're all dead. What's the use of this commendation order? Xiang Yang sighed and turned to walk to his chair. His footsteps were somewhat staggered, as if he had aged a few years in an instant. It's still the Heavenly Thunder Palace Master's commendation order, he said helplessly and self-deprecatingly. I've lived for so long, but I've never seen such a standard commendation order. Today, thanks to my two disciples, my horizons have been broadened. Master, no matter what, the two junior brothers have won glory for our 10,000 Thunder Valley. Yan Qinglian thought for a moment, and said while suppressing her grief, "Didn't the commendation order say it? Junior brother Chui is in charge of the first team of our Heavenly Thunder sect, and has outstanding military achievements. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for recommendation and monthly votes." -8. Chapter 2369. Bullshit! Helplessness cursed. What's the use of these battle merits? Only when a person is alive can there be battle merits. If a person is dead, there will naturally be no battle merits. Sigh, even the heavens don't give me a chance to breathe. Helplessness raised his head and said, I originally wanted to go into seclusion to break through to the Golden Core realm. How can this old man still have the mood? Husband! Zhuo Minghui, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. Things have already come to this. Husband! You should calm down a bit. As she spoke, Zhuo Minghui's hand naturally rested on her belly. Grand Master, why is your belly so big? Xiang Zhili restrained himself for a long time, but in the end, he couldn't hold back and asked, Did you eat too much? Hee, you child! Zhuo Minghui's face turned even redder. Yan Qinglian looked at Zhuo Minghui's bashful expression and stole a glance at Xiang Yang. Xiang Yang was also a bit unnatural. Ever since helplessness and Zhuo Minghui used a secret technique to consume the inner cores of the male and female lightning beasts, they rarely came to helplessness's cave. They were afraid of this kind of awkwardness. No one knew the power of the inner cores better than them. Now that Xiang Zhili asked, they couldn't not answer. Lear! Yan Qinglian waved her hand and said, Grand Master is pregnant with your junior martial uncle. And it's just like when you were in mother's arms when you were young. Oh? This child is aware of this. Xiang Zhili came to a realization, but he still said casually, Grand Master is already so old. How can you still be pregnant with junior martial uncle? Junior martial uncle? Wouldn't he be even younger than the boy? Zhuo Minghui was so embarrassed that her face turned red like a piece of cloth. She almost wanted to fly back to the inner palace. Hee. Xiang Zhili was still smart after all. He immediately realized his inappropriate behavior and Zhuo Minghui's embarrassment. He chuckled and said, It's great that Lear has a junior martial uncle. Lear will definitely take good care of him and protect him well. As soon as he said that, the four of them felt their hearts ache, and tears almost flowed out. Sigh, it seems like my myriad Thunder Valley is lacking in people. With Lear and Wu Qing, Xiao Hua and Hong Shun are going. Xiang Zhili gritted his teeth and sighed. Wu Qing? Xue Minghui was shocked and asked curiously. Husband, is this the name you gave the child? That's right. Helplessly he nodded. Man's suffering in this world is burdened by the word love. If he gets rid of the word love, he will be free and unfettered. Let the child be called Wu Qing. Yes. Although Xue Minghui was dissatisfied with the name, she had no choice but to agree reluctantly. It was easy to change the child's name. He would wait until the child was born and grew up. Where's Qimeng? Yan Qinglian suddenly thought of something and asked. It wasn't mentioned in the reward order. I think it's fine, Xue Minghui replied. What a good kid. It's a pity that Hong Shun doesn't have such luck. Do Xue, and since you know. Xiang Yang looked at Yan Qinglian and asked helplessly. The commendation order has just arrived, he said helplessly. I'm afraid they don't know yet. However, according to the disciple who passed down the order, the entire Imperial Thunder sect must know about it. It won't be long before they know about it. Alas, two pitiful children. Xue Minghui sighed again. They also have a hard life. He, as he spoke, helplessly suddenly raised his head and looked outside. Qian Dihing is here. Alas, this child is actually quite close to Xiao Hua. Disciple will go and welcome him. Hearing that Qian Diheng had come, helplessly got up and said, Yes, go. He is the legitimate son of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. When Xiao Hua was here, he naturally had to entertain him. Now that he's not here, we can't be rude. Helplessly waved his hand. A moment after Xiang Yang left, Qian Diheng rushed in from outside the cave like a monkey. As soon as he entered the door, he shouted, Martial Uncle Helplessness, let disciple see the commendation order. Yes. Helplessness couldn't blame Qian Diheng for his rudeness. He handed the Jade Archive to him. Qian Diheng carefully looked at it. His face was extremely disappointed. He turned his hand and returned the Jade Archive to Helplessness. He scratched his head and was puzzled. Damn it, how could this guy be gone? Why didn't I feel anything? This guy had always been cautious and could run away. How could he sacrifice his life for righteousness? However, Qian Diheng muttered to himself for a moment. He looked at Helplessness and bowed. Martial Uncle Helplessness. When this junior saw the commendation order in the Heavenly Thunder Palace, this junior felt that this matter was a little strange. But as for the specifics, this junior couldn't say. Now that I've seen the Jade Archive personally signed by the sect leader, I still feel that something is wrong. But as for the specifics, this junior couldn't say. That, in any case, Xiao Hua is this junior's brother. Although he may have left, if there's anything in the Myriad Thunder Valley in the future, you can still look for this junior. And, in addition, this junior had some transactions with Xiao Hua. Now that he's gone, this transaction will be handed over to the Myriad Thunder Valley in the future. Of course, it's still too early to say this. But this junior will say this first, lest Xiao Hua, that guy, blame this junior in the underworld. Damn it! Xiao Hua is gone. How come this senior doesn't feel the slightest bit of grief? Qian Diheng rubbed his eyes. Helplessly, the others were baffled. They didn't know what Qian Diheng was talking about, so they couldn't interrupt. Qian Diheng rubbed his eyes with all his might, but there were still no tears. He could only shrug his shoulders awkwardly and say, I, Qian, have let down that guy Xiao Hua. He's gone, but this senior didn't shed a single drop of fake tears. But just as he said this, a kind of sadness suddenly emerged from his heart. An inexplicable sadness immediately filled Qian Diheng's entire body. Qian Diheng's nose suddenly turned sour, and a few drops of tears flowed out. This senior! Qian Diheng said a few words, turned around, and flew out of the cave. Junior brother Qian! Xian Yang was anxious and wanted to chase after him. Yan Qinglian grabbed Xian Yang and said anxiously, "Where are you going?" "Junior brother Qian, he..." Xian Yang was a little stunned. He pointed outside the cave, as if he wanted to distinguish something. Alas, he sighed helplessly and said, "Xiao Hua, that little bastard, actually made friends with Qian Diheng, a good brother who treated each other with sincerity. I really didn't expect that the playboy of the Heavenly Thunder Palace was also a true cultivator." Hearing this, Xian Yang's face turned slightly red. When he heard the news of Xiao Hua and Cui Hongshan's deaths, his mind was filled with disbelief. But when it came to grief and sadness, he really didn't cry. How could he compare to Qian Diheng, who actually had tears streaming down his face? Looking at Xiang Zhili again, he was staring at Zhuo Minghui's bulging belly with his small eyes, as if he was curious about how his martial uncle, who he had never seen before, could miraculously come out from inside. As for Xiao Hua's death, he didn't take it seriously at all. Alas, maybe it's because junior brother Xiao, the time he spent in the Myriad Thunder Valley was too short. Xiang Yang sighed. This familial affection has also faded a lot. Thinking about this, that kind of sadness also slowly came. Xian Yang's eyes also became a little moist. The matter of Xiao Hua and Cui Hongshan slowly flashed in his mind. At this time, he heard a clear voice from outside. "Eh? Qian Diheng, what's wrong with you? Why are your eyes so red? Sun Shu is here." Xian Yang immediately raised his eyes to look at Yan Qinglian. Yan Qinglian hastily got up, and Zhuo Minghui's face became even redder. "My eyes were confused by the sand. What's wrong? Have you never been confused before?" Qian Diheng's slightly overbearing voice sounded. "Ha ha, senior brother Qian, don't worry too much. Xiao Hua is fine." This smiling voice naturally belonged to Shui. Ah? Everyone was stunned. Whether it was Wu Qi and Zhuo Minghui who were sitting on the jade chairs, or Xian Yang who had already stood up, or even Yan Qinglian who had walked to the door to welcome them, they all showed astonishment on their faces. While they were talking, Shui, Sun Shu, and Qian Diheng walked in. The three of them had different expressions. Qian Diheng's eyes were red, and there was embarrassment on his face. Sun Shu's eyebrows were tightly knitted, and the deep worry on his face was difficult to erase. Looking at Shui again, she had a smile on her face. Although there was a trace of worry in her eyes, there was no sorrow. Yan Qinglian welcomed the three of them into the cave. Shui and Sun Shu stepped forward to greet Wu Qi and Zhuo Minghui. The two of them also very naturally saw that Zhuo Minghui was pregnant, and both of them changed into smiles to congratulate Zhuo Minghui. Zhuo Minghui lightly bit her lips, and a faint blush appeared on her face. She asked, Shui, what did you say just now? Xiao Hua is fine. How did you know? Then, what about Hongshin? Haha, good for Martial Uncle Zhuo to know. This concubine and Xiao Hua have some connection. Shui smiled and said, This concubine also just heard about the commendation order that was sent to Sunlei Palace, and knew about Xiao Hua and the others. But this concubine didn't feel that something had happened to Xiao Hua. So, I was afraid that Martial Uncle Wu Qi and Martial Uncle Zhuo would be worried, so I hurried over with Senior Sister Sun to inform them. As for Martial Brother Cui and the others, Shui hesitated and said, This concubine doesn't know. But since Xiao Hua is fine, they must be fine too. Even if something happened to them, Xiao Hua wouldn't ignore it. And after all, they are the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Martial Brother Xiao is the most generous to his own teammates. Sun Shu was still half believing and half doubtful, but she also agreed with absolute certainty. Wu Qi and the others smiled somewhat bitterly. Although, when Xiao Hua met with danger in QC, Shui knew in advance that Xiao Hua would be fine. But this time was different. After all, the commendation order of the head of Heavenly Thunder Palace had already been sent out, and the situation had also been clearly explained. How could Xiao Hua and Cui Hongshan possibly be alive? Wu Qi glanced at Xue Minghui, and the two of them suddenly understood, thinking that Xue was comforting them. This concubine also doesn't really believe it. Sun Shu lightly clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, but since martial sister Xue is martial brother Zhao's lover, perhaps she can really sense martial brother Zhao's safety. You can really sense it? Qian Dihing didn't believe it. Actually, this concubine already thought about it on the way here. Xue smiled mysteriously and said, it's very simple to prove what this concubine said. Martial Uncle Wu Qi only needs to go to Heavenly Thunder Palace's Jade Archive Hall, isn't that enough? -8. Chapter 2370. Oh, that's right. Qian Dihing slapped his forehead and exclaimed, I was wondering why I felt that something was wrong. So it's here. Why didn't I think of going to the Jade Archive Hall? After saying that, he didn't stay any longer. Without saying another word, he turned around and flew out of the cave. Xiang Yang, follow Qian Dihing to have a look. Helplessness came to his senses and hurriedly shouted, yes, I'll go now. Xiang Yang's face was equally excited. He quickly caught up and flew into the sky. Martial Uncle Xue. Xue glanced at Sun Shu. Both of them walked over and chatted with Xue Minghui. Although they didn't talk much, Xue Minghui's shyness was soon gone. She even whispered to them. In just a few hours, Xiang Yang and Qian Diheng had returned. Damn it, I really shed a few tears for that guy. Qian Diheng cursed. I knew it. That guy has a long life. He won't die just like that. What? Helplessness hurriedly got up and asked. Where's Hongshan? His natal spiritual tablet. Haha, good, I know. Seeing the anxious look in the cave residence, Xiang Yang smiled and said, I followed junior brother Qian to the Zhenlei Palace and didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall. Humph, the Jade Archive Hall of the Zhenlei Palace was closed at the beginning of the Sword Principal battle. Without the sect leader's personal order, no one can enter. Qian Diheng was a little resentful. Even I couldn't enter the Jade Archive Hall. Helplessness listened and his face darkened. He glared at Xiang Yang and scolded. Since you didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall, why are you so happy? Master! Xiang Yang smiled apologetically. I didn't enter the Jade Archive Hall, but I saw Zhen Liang who was on duty. What did he say? Did he know that Hongshan's natal spiritual tablet was not damaged? Helplessly, Xiang Yang smiled bitterly and explained. The sect leader also ordered that the disciples on duty in the Jade Archive Hall must report the situation of the natal spiritual tablet to the deacon at any time. He wanted to scold Xiang Yang, but he was too lazy to do so. After talking for so long, he still didn't know about Cui Hongshan and Xiaohua's life spirit tablets. Xiang Yang, how do you know that Xiaohua and Cui Hongshan are fine? Xue Minghui said with a smile. She knew that Xiang Yang was a steady person. If he wasn't certain, he wouldn't be so happy. All right, teacher, mother understands. Xiang Yang said. When Zhen Liang saw that it was me and junior brother Qian, other than explaining to junior brother Qian who wanted to barge into the Jade Archive Hall, he also smiled and told me something. Oh? Xue Minghui asked curiously. What did Zhen Liang say? Zhen Liang said that as early as a few days ago, the disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace had already come to the Jade Archive Hall and specifically looked at the life spirit tablets of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples. Moreover, they came again yesterday with the sect master's handwritten order in their hands. They had placed special restrictions on the life spirit tablets of some of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples. Other than the sect master, no one else was allowed to look at them. Xiang Yang emphasized the words. Some of the Heavenly Thunder Palace's disciples. As if Zhen Liang was explaining. Humph, that dog. Qian Diheng curled his lips and sneered. He didn't let me in and even hinted at me from the side. If he didn't say that it was related to my brother, I wouldn't have let him off so easily. Helplessly ignoring Qian Diheng, he pondered for a moment and said cautiously. Xiang Yang, are you sure that what Zhen Liang said was related to Cui Hongshan and Xiaohua? Yes, I'm sure. Then Xiang Yang told him about Zhen Qing and Xiao Hua. He explained with a smile. Junior brother Xiao and Zhen Qing got to know each other after a fight. If he saw that junior brother Dao's natal spiritual tablet was damaged, he would definitely tell me secretly. What he said didn't violate the rules of the Jade Archive Hall, and also told me about the two junior brothers. Yes, I understand. Helplessly sighed in relief. Xue Minghui and the others also looked better. However, the sect leader knew that junior brother Xiao and junior brother Cui didn't die, so why did he still give out the reward? Xiang Yang asked with a frown. Senior brother Xiang, this is the sect leader's business. Don't make wild guesses if there's nothing important, Qian Dihing said bluntly. Then, he bowed to helplessly and said, Martial uncle helplessly, since Xiao Hua didn't die, what I said just now was nonsense. I still have something to do. Goodbye. Good. Xiang Yang nodded and said to Xiang Yang, Xiang Yang, help me see the guests out. No need. I'll take my leave now. Qian Diheng nodded to the crowd again, turned around, and left as nimbly as when he came. This guy. Sun Shu glanced at Qian Diheng's back and said in a low voice, Unless Xiao Hua is here, he looks down on everyone. He won't say a word to anyone. Beside him, Xiang Yang smiled bitterly and said secretly, What's the meaning of this? You haven't seen how that guy messed around in the Jade Archive Hall. If it weren't for the sect leader's order, he would have really rushed into the Jade Archive Hall. Martial uncle helplessly, are you going to go into seclusion soon? Shui chatted with Xue Minghui for a while, then raised her head and asked. Yes, this old man is planning to do so. Helplessly nodded. However, this old man feels a little rushed. There are some things that I haven't prepared yet. By the way, I wonder if Martial Uncle Sun Ming is free? This old man wants to go over and have a chat with her. This is difficult. Shui covered her mouth and smiled. She looked at Sun Shu and said, Master is also in seclusion. She seems to be breaking through the bottleneck of the middle gold core stage. I'm afraid she can't see Martial Uncle. So it's like this. Helplessly said. Martial Uncle, don't worry. Shui said with assurance. Martial Uncle will definitely be able to condense the core this time. This junior has a premonition. Oh? Helplessly raised his eyebrows and said with some joy. Really? Of course. Shui nodded and said firmly. This junior has some insignificant premonition, similar to Xiao Hua's matter. Good. Helplessly's heart suddenly felt at ease. He understood in his heart that there were countless strange people in the cultivation world. There were countless cultivators like Shui who had the bloodline of the true spirit and had strange magical abilities. Since she could judge that Xiao Hua was fine one after another, then her premonition towards him shouldn't be a problem. This old woman also wants to go into seclusion in a few months. Xue Minghui said with a smile. Shui, do you think this old woman can condense the core? Shui was stunned and then said with a smile. Martial Uncle Xue, it's still early for you. No matter what, you should wait until the child is a little older? AI, this old woman has been tied up in the late stage of foundation establishment for many years. If I don't think about condensing the core now, I'm afraid I won't have another chance. Shui glanced at Xue Minghui's abdomen and lightly bit her lips. She already faintly understood why Xue Minghui was pregnant. She thought for a moment and said with a smile, Martial Uncle Minghui, you worry too much. This junior thinks that Martial Uncle will definitely be able to condense the core in a few years. Really? When Xue Minghui heard this, her face was filled with joy like a blooming flower. Shui's face also showed a trace of a smile. The north of Meng country was not yet connected to Huan country. Although it was a little cold, the wind was bleak and the rain was hitting the banana leaves. It was completely different from the cold of Huan country's world of ice and snow. In a gorgeous room, there was a vermilion candlestick. On the candlestick, there was a half-lit red candle. At this time, the red candle still had a flame the size of a thumb. The dripping candle tears accumulated from the top of the red candle all the way to the candlestick. The flame of the candle fluttered and swayed slightly. The entire room, bright and dark, swayed. The bright and dark light shone on the vermilion bed next to it. Through the red embroidered canopy, it fell on a person. Pa! There was a soft sound, as if the candle flame had exploded. At this time, the person on the bed moved slightly. However, it was not this person who took the initiative. It was the person lying next to her who moved. This was a man. This was a man with strong muscles. This man was not an outsider, but Zhang Qishao. Zhang Qishao gently got up and turned to look at the woman lying next to him. He leaned over and gently kissed the woman's cheek before standing up. Wasn't the person lying on the bed Zhang Yutong? At this time, Zhang Yutong frowned slightly and her eyelashes trembled slightly. Qin Xiao. How long are you going to hide this from me? Like sleep talk, like a whisper, and like a complaint, a faintly discernible voice came out from the corner of Zhang Yutong's mouth. What? In the Battle of Jinshan, 7 people from the Imperial Thunder sect died? Among them were Xiao Hua and He Chui Hongxin. In a quiet room not far from this room, Zhang Qingxiao's face showed a ferocious expression. He held a jade slip in his hand and was roaring at an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. -8. Chapter 2371. That cultivator was very surprised, but seeing Zhang Qishao angry, he was extremely afraid. He bowed and said, Yes, yes. Lord Sect Master, when I received the news I didn't care, but when I saw the 2 people that Sect Master specially mentioned, I personally sent them over. In just a moment, Zhang Qishao had already regained her calm. She nodded and patted that cultivator's shoulder. She smiled and said, Not bad, you did well. Thank you for your praise, Sect Master. That cultivator was flattered. He patted his hand again and took out another jade slip. He handed it to Zhang Qishao and said, This disciple was afraid that Lord Sect Master had other matters, so I recorded the situation of Jishan Quan and the map. Zhang Qishao was overjoyed. She took the jade slip and patted it again. She took out a token and smiled. Good job, this is a reward from this Sect Master. Take it and receive your reward. In the future you must do such things more often. That cultivator's eyes lit up. He took the token and bowed. Thank you, Sect Master, for your generous gift. This disciple will take his leave. After the disciple left, Zhang Qishao impatiently immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. After he read it carefully, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. Stroking his chin with his hand, he whispered to himself, Tens of thousands of swordsmen? At most, it would be Liang Jian's cultivation level. Xiao Hua wouldn't be in any danger. However, if there were really 30 illusory swordsmen besieging him, damn this guy. I'm afraid he won't be able to defeat them. But the problem is, how could there be 30 illusory swordsmen besieging this guy? Even I can't see through this guy's background, how could others notice him? But on the other hand, this Tu Hong, how could he be so vicious and merciless? He actually killed 70,000 people in a big battle. Under such a big scale, Xiao Hua might really be implicated. Damn it, this guy must be meddling in other people's business and being indecisive. Instead of escaping himself, he wants to save others. No, I have to take a look. Zhang Qishao thought for a moment, and finally patted her hand to keep the jade slip. She looked at the map of Jinshan Quan again and made a decision. However, just as he was about to put the jade slip away, he smirked. Yutong, why don't you sleep a little longer? You must be tired last night. You don't have to wake up so early, do you? However, even after Zhang Qishao said those words, there was still no response. Oh? Yutong, what happened to you? Zhang Qishao turned to look at Zhang Yutong. At this moment, Zhang Yutong was not wearing her sword attire. She was only wearing a silk cloth covering her body, revealing the other side of her beauty. What's the matter now? Zhang Yutong stared straight at Zhang Qishao and asked softly. Yes, that's right. The sect master sent an order for me to go to Hung country to investigate a matter, Zhang Qishao said without hesitation. Oh? You want to go to Sword Domain? Zhang Yutong's face revealed a burst of joy. Can you take me with you? Zhang Yutong asked timidly. Zhang Qishao also shook her head without hesitation. How can that be? If the sect master finds out, I won't be able to keep my life. Is that so? Zhang Yutong's face revealed disappointment. However, she still said softly, Then I understand. Go and do your work. Yutong, Zhang Qishao could not bear it and comforted her. Wait a little longer. When the sect master has forgotten about you, I will plead with the sect master. Is the sect master of heavenly demon sect so easily moved? Zhang Yutong said coldly. Even if he has forgotten about me, as long as you mention it, won't he know? You have done so many things that he cannot tolerate. Aren't you afraid that he will take your life? I'm not afraid. Zhang Qishao flew over and pulled Zhang Yutong into her arms. She said decisively, For you, I am willing to give up my life. Really? Zhang Yutong's voice was a little misty. Her gaze fell on the roof again. Really? Zhang Qishao kissed Zhang Yutong's lips and did not forget to answer. That's good. Zhang Yutong's eyes were a little dazed. She murmured, As long as you are sincere to me, anything doesn't matter. Zhang Yutong's delicate body gradually heated up. Zhang Qishao did not understand the other meaning in Zhang Yutong's fairy tale. Dozens of days later, in the sky above Golden Spring Mountain, a pitch-black light flashed. Zhang Qingxiao's figure flashed out from the middle. He scanned the surroundings with his divine sense and sniffed. He sneered. As expected, the smell of blood is very strong. The Dao sect prides itself on being righteous and looks down on other cultivators. But when they kill people, they are crazier than others. These 70,000 lives, even I, will hesitate for half a day. Yes, it's here. Zhang Qishao looked at it for a moment, and then her figure flew down from the sky and fell into the black hole that was 1,000 feet wide. However, in less than an hour, Zhang Qishao flew out again with a puzzled look on her face. Damn it, there is so much spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this array. What's shocking is that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is constantly flowing. The spiritual energy is violent and chaotic. Even my demonic sense and divine sense cannot penetrate it. Junior brother Xiao. If you really fell into it, you would have died long ago. Sai, if you die, my Qiuyilu will also have no chance. My life will belong to someone else sooner or later. How can you die? Then, a trace of ruthlessness flashed in Zhang Qingxiao's eyes. His hands moved, but he hesitated and did not hit the ground. Junior brother Xiao, it's not that I don't want to save you. I will risk my life and destroy this array now. But do you still have a life now? If you had died, I'm afraid you would have turned into white bones and a vengeful spirit. If you hadn't died. Zhang Qishao thought of this, and her eyes lit up again. She smiled and said, Damn it, I'm so used to being a cultivator that I've forgotten the gatekeeping method of the heavenly demon sect. As he said, Zhang Qishao scanned with his divine sense. He did not see any trace of cultivators. His figure flashed and fell into the black hole again. He patted his hand and took out a palm-sized blood-red banner from his storage bag. Zhang Qishao chanted a mantra, and a dark green flame gradually appeared in his right hand. When he slapped the banner with his hand, a thick black smoke rose from the banner. Go! Zhang Qishao waved the banner in his hand. The black smoke turned into a wisp and drilled into the array underground. However, when the black smoke came into contact with the array, it immediately boiled and bubbled like boiling water. It could not penetrate the array at all. Zhang Qingxiao's face was a little ugly. Damn it, what kind of array did Tu Hong set up? Even my heavenly demon sex technique can't penetrate it. I can clearly feel that there are countless resentful spirits in the array. They are all sword cultivators and cultivators with resentment who were killed by Tu Hong, but I can't find out anything. -8. Chapter 2372. Eh? Someone's coming! Zhang Qishao raised her eyebrows and kept the long banner. With a flash of her body, as though she was tearing the void apart, she disappeared into the black hole. Not long after, she saw a few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators sneakily flying over. Similarly, they landed in the black hole and used all sorts of secret techniques in an attempt to break the array. Humph, if you guys can break it, even I would be laughing. Zhang Qishao popped out half of her head to take a look and sneered. It's your fortune if you guys can't break it. If you do, the first ones to lose your lives will be you guys. Following which, the corner of Zhang Qingxiao's mouth twitched again. She stretched out her hand and took out dozens of fireball talismans and threw them into the air. Rumble! A loud sound was heard and Zhang Qingxiao's voice screamed again. Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones! Someone is stealing Spring Jinshan's spirit stones! Quick, let's go take a look! From afar, a group of 6th-grade swordsmen were patrolling. Hearing the commotion at Spring Jinshan, they immediately flew over on their swords. As for the few Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators in the black hole, they all rushed out from the hole with a black face. Using their spiritual senses, they saw many swordsmen flying over and were all shocked. Without saying anything, they scattered and fled in all directions like stray dogs. Ha ha ha, Zhang Qishao had already flown far away. Seeing the group of Foundation establishment late-stage cultivators being chased, she laughed so hard that she clutched her stomach and fell into the air. She laughed so hard that tears were about to fall. Time passed very quickly. Day after day, month after month. Closing one's eyes and opening one's eyes would be a night. Opening one's eyes and closing one's eyes would be a day. Sometimes, after closing one's eyes, one would not be able to open them again. Sometimes, even if one opened one's eyes, one would not be able to see the next day's sun. 5 years passed in a blink of an eye. The war between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators continued to expand. The flames of war burned the borders of Huan country, Shi country and Ming country. Sometimes, it would penetrate deep into Huan country, sometimes it would penetrate deep into Shi country and Ming country. Furthermore, just like in the previous battles, the Dao sect was overwhelmed at the start, and was not prepared enough. Under the deliberate planning of the sword cultivators, they were always at a disadvantage. However, as the cultivators gradually gained a foothold and adapted to the attacks of the sword cultivators, especially when they were even more shameless than the sword cultivators, this disadvantage was reversed. Both sides were once again in a stalemate. This stalemate was very similar to the glue between lovers. Wherever there were cultivators, there would definitely be swordsmen. And wherever there were swordsmen, there would definitely be cultivators. During this period, there were several famous battles, and both sides had their victories and defeats. However, these big battles were not as loud as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, nor were the casualties as heavy as the battle at Golden Spring Mountain. The Golden Core cultivators in the meeting hall, in terms of cultivation, were all outstanding. But in terms of military strategy, how could they be Tu Hong's opponent? Even if they were to stack up, they would not be able to match up to Tu Hong. In these few battles, the victories were all due to Tu Hong's planning, the losses were all due to Tu Hong's compromises. Tu Hong's position in the meeting hall was getting more and more important. The so-called daily duty was just a figurehead. Almost all the key military affairs, the Golden Core cultivators on duty would seek Tu Hong's opinion. Without his opinion, the hearts of the Golden Core cultivators would be empty. Although these Golden Core cultivators were filled with jealousy, but they had no choice. Seeing the rise of Tu Hong, Imperial Thunder Sect's GNMO was happy. Because Tu Hong's attitude towards him was obviously different from the other cultivators. Tu Hong was cautious and respectful, subtly raising GNMO by half a head. GNMO naturally knew what Tu Hong was thinking. Moreover, the 5-year agreement between Imperial Thunder Sect and Sky Patrol City was coming to an end. Tu Hong and Dui Qiming's dual cultivation ceremony was already on the agenda. In these 5 years, Dui Qiming did not participate in any battles. She had always been meditating in the Imperial Thunder Sect's encampment. The place where she, Ming Mao, and Dui Ling lived was still the same as before. As time passed, Ming Mao and Dui Ling returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Only Dui Qiming lived alone in the secluded place. Tu Hong often came to visit and informed her of the battles in Sky Patrol's city. Dui Qiming was still reserved at first, but gradually she accepted it. Now that the dual cultivation ceremony was about to be held, Dui Qiming was considering whether to move to Tu Hong's residence. According to Qian Mo's observation, at the very beginning, Dui Qiming was still a little gloomy. She would always secretly cry, but as time passed, her tears turned into lamentation, and lamentation turned into hidden bitterness. In the end, the bitterness disappeared, leaving behind only a faint contemplation on her brows. This faint contemplation showed Dui Qiming's temperament, making it easier for people to feel tender affection for her. Hee time? It's the world's best healing spirit pill. No matter if it's the physical body or the heart, it's always effective. Qian Mo couldn't help but praise Tu Hong's brilliance in his heart. Everything in Sky Patrol City and Sword Domain could not change the grand array of Golden Spring Mountain. As the battle spread, the cultivators and swordsmen seemed to have forgotten about Golden Spring Mountain. They also seemed to have forgotten about the flying swords and treasures of the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators within the grand array. The grand array of Golden Spring Mountain seemed to have become a huge mystery buried deep under Golden Spring Mountain. It would only be revealed 10 years later when the nascent soul cultivators entered the battle. However, what everyone didn't expect was that within this unsolvable mystery, there was a fierce Xiaohua. In these 5 years, he cultivated with all his might, refining the almost endless heaven and earth spiritual qi, constantly avoiding the fate of being destroyed by the heaven and earth spiritual qi at any time. As Xiaohua cultivated bitterly, as Xiaohua was struck by the spirit qi again and again, his cultivation also advanced by leaps and bounds. At this time, he was already close to the peak of Foundation Establishment late stage. Although Ling Yunwu and the other 12 swordsmen transformed into 12 flying swords, the 7 stars grand array that imprisoned Xiaohua still existed. And because Ling Yunwu and the other swordsmen transformed into flying swords, the power of imprisonment was even stronger and tighter. Of course, with the passage of time, although the power of imprisonment did not weaken, under Xiaohua's cultivation of Foundation Establishment late stage, it had already loosened. In the end, when Xiaohua was already able to resist the attacks of the spirit qi, he even tried to break the 7 stars grand array. However, Xiaohua only dabbled in it, and did not really use his full strength. After all, to be so quiet, or to be forced to cultivate by the spirit qi, to Xiaohua, was something that could only be encountered by chance and not sought after. He almost wanted to condense his core or absorb all the spirit qi in the grand array before coming out of seclusion. After all, Xiaohua was clear in his heart that the amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi he needed for cultivation was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. The green spirit pill he used to advance from Foundation Establishment late stage to Foundation Establishment late stage was probably enough for a nascent soul cultivator to advance from initial stage to intermediate stage. It would be a waste if he did not take advantage of such a great opportunity. However, since entering the peak of Foundation Establishment late stage, Xiaohua could no longer cultivate in peace. It was like a small thorn in his heart. It was not big, but it made him uncomfortable. If he paid attention to it, he could not find any trace of it at all. Is it possible that there is another cause and effect? Or is it because I can't condense my core without Lingli pill? Xiaohua was not very surprised. Although this feeling was not as strong as when he was looking for Dyer in Sentry City, it was obvious that there was another cause and effect waiting for Xiaohua to resolve. He could no longer stay here to cultivate. Forget it! Xiaohua opened his eyes, turned his neck, and secretly said, My seclusion, well, it's a real seclusion of death. I'm afraid that the Masters of Thunder controlling sect will think that I and others have died. Oh, it's bad, isn't it? Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly realized that it was not a big deal for him to cultivate in seclusion, but wouldn't the thunder-controlling sect and the myriad Thunder Valley be turned upside down? Wouldn't Shue Shue be sad? Even if Hongxia Fairy heard it, she would also be sad. Well, it's this kind of cause and effect. Xiaohua nodded, and his divine thoughts swept through the phoenix celestial body that wrapped his whole body. At this time, the celestial body was more than 100 feet larger, reaching more than 400 feet. Inside the celestial body, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had condensed into a needle-like crystal pillar. It was surrounded by the netherworld wind, and there was a layer of ink sand on it. These crystal thorns were extremely small, and they rotated at a high speed. Hundreds of thousands of crystal thorns clustered together, forming a funnel-shaped vortex. These vortexes were densely packed, and there were countless of them, covering the phoenix celestial body. However, if one took a closer look, there were still some patterns. There were 132 million small areas, and each area revolved around an imaginary point. These 132 million small crystal spikes revolved in the same pattern, and the pace of their rotation was also the same. However, under the impact of the spirit howl, these 132 million crystal thorns slowly rotated within the phoenix celestial body. Xiaohua used his primordial spirit to sense the changes in the celestial body, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, where did this incomplete jade slip come from to the Dong Rain continent? This is obviously not the path of cultivation of the Dao sect. If one looks at the rotation of these 132 million crystal thorns, it is actually somewhat similar to the star Dao of the Xian Kong Pavilion. It's a pity that this cultivation technique is incomplete, and the space for improvement is limited. As for how far this celestial body can cultivate in the future, it will depend on this young master's luck. What does this young master lack? Maybe spirit stones, maybe pills, maybe cultivation techniques. But what about luck? This young master has never lacked anything. Xiaohua couldn't help but think of the auspicious jade talisman that he kept close to his body. However, since this cultivation technique needs to be cleansed with spiritual energy at the beginning, the threshold is really too high. If I want to cultivate in the future, I'm afraid that the conditions will be even more terrible, right? This kind of thing that scares this young master to death, it's better not to come to it. -8. Chapter 2373. How are Cui Hongshan and these 6 dumb birds? Xiaohua thought as his mind entered the space again. Cui Hongshan and the other 5 were still lying casually on the ground and hadn't woken up. They were exactly the same as when they had been sent in 5 years ago. The only difference was that Little Silver, who had been berated by Little Yellow to watch over the 6 people, was now jumping from one person to another, and then from another to another. The hair on their heads had been messed up by Little Silver, and there were even some bald spots. Damn it, how am I supposed to explain this to these people? Xiaohua was both angry and amused. Little Silver was jumping happily on the 6 people. Sensing Xiaohua's mind, he immediately stopped and stood on the tip of Cui Hongshan's nose. He raised his little head and looked up at the sky with his mouse eyes. His 2 pink little paws were clasped in front of his chest, and his little tail swayed casually in front of Cui Hongshan's eyes. Little Yellow, let Little Silver go back, Xiaohua said to Little Yellow, who was already a little clear-headed. Got it, mother! Little Yellow's voice was still a little lazy. Little Silver then ran around the 6 people like a puff of smoke, and plucked a few more strands of their hair from his little paws. He then quickly ran across the ground and rushed into his own spirit field. What's so fun about this hair? Xiaohua was speechless. Mother, is this that little girl? Little Yellow suddenly asked. Xiaohua naturally knew that Little Yellow was talking about that big injured duck. It should be. Mother can't be sure. Boy knows, her aura is that little girl's. Little Yellow yawned and said in his heart, but she's seriously injured, and her life force is still a little weak. Life force. You know about life force? Xiaohua was a little astonished. In his heart, Little Yellow was just a little thing that didn't know anything. Boy can think of something as he sleeps, as if it's already in the boy's mind. This way, your child will slowly understand. Goldie himself was also puzzled. My goodness, what kind of spirit beast is this? Xiaohua was secretly surprised. However, he exhorted. This dyer has done us a great favor. You watch her carefully. If there's any abnormality, quickly call Mother. I know, Mother, Goldie said disapprovingly. That situation was no different from a rebellious child. Have you grown up? Xiaohua also felt helpless when he heard the same helpless tone as himself. Keep, Xiaohua's mind left the space. He shrugged his shoulders slightly and took the Phoenix Dharma body back into his body. Immediately, another wave of spiritual pressure came crashing over. Xiaohua felt his body tighten. His meridians and corporeal body were filled with an extremely large amount of heaven and earth spirit qi. He had no choice but to mobilize a few more primordial spirits to refine the heaven and earth spirit qi. Thanks to the Phoenix Dharma body! As Xiaohua refined the spiritual energy, he sighed. Otherwise, this young master would have already turned into a vengeful spirit 5 years ago. Thinking of the vengeful spirits, Xiaohua's ears once again produced a mournful sound. Although this sound was covered by the tide of spiritual pressure, a strange kind of fear naturally arose from Xiaohua's heart. AI, needless to say, Xiaohua understood in his heart. This is the unyielding spirit of those cultivators and swordsmen that Tu Hong killed. Forget it, this is also one of this young master's merits. I just don't know if the Buddha's relic can be affected by the spiritual pressure. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, then carefully released the Buddha's relic. Within the spiritual pressure of the Buddha's relic, that golden light flourished, illuminating the surroundings. The vengeful spirits that had faded into the smoke seemed to have seen the beauty of heaven and earth, and swarmed forward like a swarm of bees. And, seeing that the Buddha's relic was not affected by the spiritual pressure, Xiaohua inwardly nodded, then secretly laughed. Of course, the vengeful spirits are not afraid of the spiritual pressure, so the Buddha's relic is even less afraid. Immediately after, Xiaohua did not hesitate. The Buddha's relic chanted the 9 syllables of truth, and the brilliant golden, descend, characters flew out from the Buddha's mouth one by one, landing on each of the vengeful spirits. Those vengeful spirits were originally the vengeful spirits of cultivators and swordsmen, and were filled with unyielding and injustice. When the army character landed on them, a wisp of green smoke immediately flew out from their bodies, and their entire souls became clear. Those souls once again transformed into human form, bowed towards the Buddha's relic, and said, "Many thanks to the Venerable One," then immediately disappeared. And that wisp of green smoke also floated within the spiritual pressure, disappearing without a trace. However, at the same time that it disappeared, an even smaller blood-like thing that even Buddha's sense could not detect fell into Xiaohua's Buddha's heart. It turned into the Buddha's fire, and on top of the Buddha's fire, there was a small red dot that rushed into the tempering of the execution dream. Xiaohua originally wanted to do merits, but he did not expect that once he did it, he would not be able to stop, and it was delayed for dozens of days. Damn it! This Tu Hong has really committed a great sin. I'm afraid there are close to 100,000 vengeful spirits. In the end, Xiaohua himself was somewhat angry. He originally thought that it would be good if there were a few thousand, but who would have thought that it would actually increase by 10 times? Moreover, these vengeful spirits actually did not leave, and all of them stayed here, clearly harboring resentment towards Tu Hong. Sigh, if I think about it again, swordsmen are vicious. If this guy did not hold back, if he did not act so ruthlessly, the cultivators would also suffer heavy casualties. Xiaohua was the most sympathetic towards the suffering of others, and he only needed to put himself in their shoes to immediately understand the difficulties within. In the end, this is a great sword battle. Although these vengeful spirits are pitiful, there is nothing that can be done about it. Who told the sword cultivators to start this great battle? Naturally, this young master can ignore this kind of haggling. However, Tu Hong directly placed my thunder-controlling sect's first small team inside the Great Formation, making it clear that he wants the lives of the 7 of us. No matter what the other cultivators do, we will definitely lose our lives. This karma, this young master will not let it go. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. But why did he do this? Could it be that he received instructions from someone else? It's possible. Maybe Tu Hong and that old ghost Jing Ru have some kind of friendship. In that case, this young master has implicated Cui Hongshan and the others. Xiaohua sighed. In these 5 years, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, while Cui Hongshan and the other 4 had been unconscious for an entire 5 years. Xiaohua still felt a bit guilty in his heart. Let's talk about it when there's a chance in the future, Xiaohua thought to himself. Even if there's no benefit, at least we still managed to hold on to our lives, right? You can't resent this young master. Xiaohua was finding excuses for himself again. After waiting for the last vengeful spirit to finish transcending, Xiaohua was a bit bewildered. That's not right, that female swordsman's soul is still here, but the other 12, no, the other 20 swordsmen's souls are not here? Could it be that their souls have already dissipated? Or are they inside the flying sword? -8. Chapter 2374. Xiaohua didn't have any feelings for Ling Yinwu and the others. If it weren't for them, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such an opportunity. Since he didn't see the souls of these swordsmen, he was naturally puzzled. Well, even if they are in the flying swords, they have already turned into sword spirits. How can I be afraid of them? Thinking about it, Xiaohua put away the Buddha's saraira and waved his hand, holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. Hit! Xiaohua tried his best to hit the staff in midair. With a loud bang, the power of the 7 stars array was loosened by the wishful steel staff. Humph! Not in the 5 elements. Xiaohua snorted coldly. This wishful steel staff is really powerful. It directly attacks the power of imprisonment. It's really something that other magic weapons can't do. Now that he had a treasure like the wishful steel staff, Xiaohua's strength had a place to be used. He raised the wishful steel staff with both hands and struck the power of the 7 stars great array, breaking it little by little. Since the 7 stars array was the secret technique of the Lingfeng sword sect, it must be incomparably powerful. If there was a swordsman presiding over it, it might not be so easy for Xiaohua to break it. Unfortunately, there were only 12 flying swords. They were dead objects. Even if there were sword spirits in the flying swords, how could they control the array? In less than half an hour, the 7 stars array was broken by the incomparably brave Xiaohua with the wishful steel staff. As the array was broken, the 12 flying swords wailed at the same time and were about to leave the air. You still want to leave at this time? What wishful thinking! Xiaohua sneered and waved his big sleeve. The 12 flying swords were imprisoned by him. They obediently stopped in midair. Collect! Xiaohua waved his sleeve and the 12 flying swords fell into the space. Then, Xiaohua took out the sword from the sword pouch and let his primordial spirit comprehend it. His figure swayed slightly and was about to fly to the ground. However, just as he moved, the spiritual energy swarmed into his body, scaring him. Oh, so that's how it is. This spiritual energy is so powerful. The more you want to escape, the more it will enter. I'm afraid that the vast majority of cultivators and swordsmen will explode like this. Thus, Xiaohua hurriedly stopped and released the Phoenix Dharma body to block the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He tried his best to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that entered his body. Forget it, let's just slowly move. After Xiaohua finished refining his spiritual energy, he didn't dare to be rash and slowly moved towards the edge of the underground Great Formation. Oh, what's this? Xiaohua had just flown for a moment when he discovered a sawtoothed flying sword in front of him. Io, motherfucker! I've been running for my life for so long that I've turned stupid. Xiaohua immediately realized. If those 12 sword cultivators can transform into flying swords, then the other swordsmen can naturally do the same. The flying swords transformed by the illusory sword swordsmen are extremely precious. Needless to say, the greedy Xiaohua began to search again. However, there were more surprises to come. Gradually, Xiaohua realized that not only were there sword cultivators flying swords, there were also many Dharma treasures of Tao sect cultivators that were left unscathed in the soil. Xiaohua, who was wild with joy, was so happy that he scratched his ears and cheeks. It was as if he was picking up treasures. He kept them all in his space. However, when he calmed down a little, Xiaohua remembered. I can't take them all. I still have to go out from here in a while and return to Sky Patrol City. If I loot everything here, how can I explain it? After thinking for a while, Xiaohua found the main point of his search. He didn't want ordinary Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, and he didn't care about ordinary flying swords either. However, after another hour, Xiaohua was in trouble. Which Dharma treasure or Dharma artifact that could avoid the attack of the spirit howl was easy to obtain? Xiaohua picked up this one and threw that one away. Every one of them made his heart bleed. Who cares? I took it, so what? Who can make me spit it out? Xiaohua was ruthless. Even if that old ghost Jingru comes now, I can easily escape, right? Thinking of this, the two Dharma treasures in his hands disappeared and were sent into his space. Who cares about them? In fact, it was ridiculous to say that these Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures, Xiaohua couldn't use most of them. However, Xiaohua liked them and just wanted to keep them for himself. There was no other reason, it was his nature. Thinking about it, it took Xiaohua a few days to pick up the items of 100,000 cultivators and swordsmen. Among them, he only picked up the ones that were in good condition and threw away the ones that he didn't care about. When Xiaohua wobbled from the bottom of the great array to the top, and from the left to the right, there were so many things in this space. Xiaohua wobbled and laughed foolishly. It was really a blessing for fools. Not only Dharma treasures and flying swords, Xiaohua also picked up a lot of sword slips. Even like Ling Yunwu, Xiaohua picked up 6 of the illusory swordsman's transformed flying swords, making a total of 18 swords. What made Xiaohua the happiest was that he didn't know which sword cultivator's storage bag it came from, but there was actually a white bone palm that matched the huge skeleton in his space. Speaking of which, it took Xiaohua more than 10 days to walk through the entire great array and collect all the essences. Then, he slowly and leisurely headed towards the ground. When he arrived at the edge of the great array, he used his divine sense to carefully examine it, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously revealed a smile. This edge was different from before. It wasn't that kind of tyrannical and unstable restriction. Instead, it was a kind of sturdy restriction. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, and used his transcendence vision to look, and found the weak point of the restriction. Without hesitation, he took out the rabbit talisman and imbued it with his transcendence energy. When several rabbit talismans were embedded into the spirit array, the edges of the spirit array began to change. The previously stable restriction began to show signs of loosening. Once these signs of loosening appeared, it immediately became like a whirlwind that swept away the clouds. It could no longer be contained. This is bad. When Xiaohua saw this, he immediately understood. Although the edge of the array was stable, and the place he had touched was only a small corner, it had already caused the entire array to lose its balance. The loss of balance at the edge of the array wasn't a big deal. The key was that the spiritual howl within the array was constantly washing over it. Although 5 years had already passed, the spiritual howl hadn't even subsided by 20%. Once the edge of the array lost its balance, the spiritual howl immediately increased, and rushed towards Xiaohua's location like a swarm of bees. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent, and hastily summoned his Phoenix Dharma body, and with a wave of his hand, he collected several rabbit talismans. 1. A thunderous howl resounded from within the array. The stirred-up spiritual howl came from behind Xiaohua, and from every possible direction, slapped towards the loosened edge of the array. Xiaohua could only summon his Phoenix Dharma body, and at the same time the crystal thorns in his body rapidly revolved. He also activated his mental cultivation method and secret technique, and did his utmost to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Woo boom! With merely a huge impact, the edge of the array was broken, and with a sound like a chain, the entire array completely collapsed. In an instant, an incomparably powerful force was born from within the spirit stone mine of MT Springgold. With a thunderous momentum, it slapped towards the surroundings, rushed into the air, and rushed towards the ground. Boom! As if a dozen nascent soul cultivators had joined forces to attack, MT Springgold trembled, and countless mountain rocks and dust rushed into the sky, and countless dust fragments spread in all directions. The entire heaven and earth was completely covered by the dust. That incomparably pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth also instantly filled the area within a radius of several li. Furthermore, it spread towards the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. In merely an instant, a deep pit of several li in size formed within MT Springgold. Woo! Following closely, countless hurricanes accompanied by the diffusion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth formed in the surroundings of MT Springgold. All the trees, snow, mountain rocks, and other things within 100 li were swept up into the sky, and were thrown far away. What's going on? Just as the array exploded, in the air several li away from MT Springgold, there were two groups of disciples patrolling. One group was made up of Tao sect disciples, and the other group was made up of sword cultivators. All of them were in the middle stage of foundation establishment. A Tao sect cultivator at the peak of the middle stage of foundation establishment suddenly felt that something was amiss. Just as he had the time to shout out, the hurricane attacked him, and a powerful force swept through his body. It was extremely barbaric, and also extremely easy to tear him into pieces. There was simply no room for resistance. The other dozen cultivators were even more miserable. Before they could even think, they were swept up by the hurricane, and just as they were blown a few feet into the air, they were immediately torn apart. The group of sword cultivators were slightly stronger than the other cultivators. Their bodies were sturdy, and the flying swords under their feet were also fast. Unfortunately, they were only able to fly for several tens of li before they were pulled down from their flying swords by a powerful and chaotic force. They were forcefully thrown into the hurricane. The most pitiful one was a level 5 swordsman. Although he tried his best to control the flying sword to fly, there was still a broken flying sword in the hurricane. The huge force blew the flying sword upside down and directly penetrated the swordsman's chest with the sword hilt. It did not stop for a moment at all and rushed into the air with a whistling sound. It flew straight into the mountain rock 1,000 feet away and only stopped after it was inserted for hundreds of feet. With such a powerful force, it was no wonder that Tu Hong was so calm. He was absolutely not afraid that someone would break the array. Even a nascent soul cultivator would find it difficult to protect himself from such a huge explosion of spiritual qi, right? Unfortunately, no matter how much he calculated, he still missed out on one. That was Xiaohua, who was breaking the array within the array. The inside of the array was completely different from the outside. Although it was only the boundary of the array, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. When the array collapsed, Xiaohua tried his best to escape into the array, using the Phoenix Dharma body to protect his body. When he could no longer resist the force of the explosion of spiritual qi, he stopped resisting and rushed out of the array along with the hurricane produced by the spiritual qi. Moreover, Xiaohua was breaking the array from the bottom. His figure followed the hurricane and rushed straight into the sky. Xiaohua's figure gradually accelerated. Those magic treasures and flying swords that were enough to kill golden core cultivators were the same speed as him, and some were even in front of him. They simply did not pose any threat to him. -8. Chapter 2375. These 7 people came from the direction of MT Qianjin's array. Zhang Xian immediately understood and shouted. They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them! Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiaohua and the others out from the foothills. Damn it, can't you be a bit more gentle? Xiaohua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, wouldn't that pull have injured my tendons and bones? I don't even know how to save people. Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths. Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, We do have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many. That's not right, Senior brother Zhang. This is the Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. Another clever disciple discovered. The patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley. Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up and hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiaohua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. That's right, it's the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiaohua. I recognize these 7 people. They are the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the Battle of Mt. Quan Jin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This is a greater contribution than magic treasures. Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiaohua and the others. After everyone had consumed the elixir, Zhang Xian's heart was slightly at ease. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiaohua had previously used. These 7 people are seriously injured and cannot be moved for the time being. We will first place the 7 people in the cave and leave 1 person to guard it. The others will follow this poor Taoist to search inside. Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiaohua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiaohua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiaohua and the others, Zhang Xian once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring Mountain Range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Quan Jin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Quan Jin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Xian and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring Mountain Range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring Mountain Range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Xian was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiaohua, who was lucky enough to survive. Sigh, why is there such a big difference between people? This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Xian and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator scanned the crater with his spiritual sense, Zhang Xian immediately left with his disciples. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Xian and the rest returned to the cave, the 2 people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiaohua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Xian's return, Xiaohua, Cui Hongshan and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Xian and the rest, Cui Hongshan was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction? Xiaohua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Xian, he hesitated and said, Are you, fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction? He, junior brother Xiao, of course it's me. Zhang Xian looked at Xiaohua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, I am Zhang Xian, who participated in the Taiqing Sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever. Sigh, it's nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongshan and asked again. Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine? What happened to me and the rest? Hee, junior brother Xiao. Zhang Xian looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Cui Hongshan and the rest, who were confused, and said with a smile. This must be Captain Cui Hongshan, right? Cui Hongshan nodded and said. That's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction, nice to meet you. It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way, I'll explain it slowly. Zhang Xian thought for a while and said, Okay. Xiao Hua nodded, but Cui Hongshan frowned and said, Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? And we just recovered from our injuries? Hee. Zhang Xian laughed softly. The Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine no longer exists. As for how Brother Cui got injured, I don't know. However, when I saw all of you, your lives were hanging by a thread. Fortunately, although your injuries are serious, they're all on the skin and flesh. Your meridians and dantian are still intact. You'll naturally recover in these few days. Fellow Taoists, you are all lucky. Sigh, thinking about some of our friends. As he spoke, Zhang Xian's face paled. Oh? Xiao Hua understood and said softly. Senior brother Zhang, senior brother Yang Fangqing, it seems like, junior brother Xiao has met senior brother Yang before, right? Yes, and senior brother He Fan Yuan from Tai Ching sect, and senior brother Kuxingxi from Kunlun sect, they're all old friends of mine. Sigh, only senior brother He Fan Yuan was lucky enough to escape from Golden Spring Mountain and has returned to Tai Ching sect now. Zhang Xian sighed. I only heard about him 5 years ago. I haven't heard about him for the past few years. 5 years ago? Senior brother Zhang, what do you mean? Jin Minghui was baffled and asked unconsciously. Ha! Zhang Xian stood up and said, Let's go. Now that Golden Spring Mountain's formation has unexpectedly exploded, it attracted many cultivators and swordsmen. We should hurry back to patrol Heaven City. Golden Spring Mountain's formation? What's going on? Cui Hongshan was puzzled, but immediately after, his face showed a trace of shock as he looked at Jin Minghui and said, Senior brother Minghui, the formation that senior brother Zhang mentioned, is it that layer of restriction? -8. Chapter 2376. After exiting the formation, there was no more heaven and earth spiritual chi attacking Xiao Hua's body and meridians. Xiao Hua's body relaxed, and with a long roar, he somersaulted in the air. The phoenix celestial body spread its wings and flew along the side of the hurricane. After waiting for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the phoenix celestial body flew to the edge of the hurricane. With a loud and clear cry, the phoenix celestial body spread its 400 zhang wings and carried Xiao Hua out of the hurricane with ease. Outside the hurricane was naturally 1,000 zhang high in the sky, and the wind was biting cold. A thin layer of golden light naturally appeared around Xiao Hua's body, protecting his entire body. Roar! Outside the hurricane, the world was vast, and the boundless snow was in sight. Xiao Hua couldn't help but let out a long roar. The world was so big, and everything was under his control. Xiao Hua's heart was instantly filled with the feeling of being free and unfettered. Good boy! After flying for a while, Xiao Hua withdrew the phoenix celestial body and spread out his divine sense. When he saw that all the living things within 100 li were killed, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After thinking for a while, he understood the clues, and he felt even more lucky. Then, Xiao Hua looked at the huge pit in the Golden Spring Mountain range, and his mind spun rapidly, thinking of how to explain the reason why he and Cui Hongshan were able to survive. Hee, I'm afraid that's the only way. Xiao Hua thought for a while and came up with a plan. His body turned in a circle in midair, and with a thunderous roar, he flew towards the west. After flying for a few dozen miles, they arrived at a steep mountain range. At this time, there was no snow on the mountain range, and the forest was also destroyed. On the bare foot of the mountain, there was a small cave in front of them. Xiaohua laughed, and pointed with his hand. "This is the place!" Thus, Xiaohua flew into the cave, sat down cross-legged, and took out the Buddha Saraira. After that, he pulled Shui Hongshan and the others out of the space, erasing their memories one by one, and even slightly changing some things. After waiting for half an hour, Xiaohua proudly came out of the cave. Then, Xiaohua flew in midair and thought for a while. He looked around, and even pinched his chin. When his brows relaxed, he grabbed Shui Hongshan from the space again, and hit him with a hand seal. Then, without hesitation, he used his strength to smash Shui Hongshan into the mountain range. Rumble! Shui Hongshan's body smashed into the mountain range, and made a huge sound. Light flashed around his body, and his body was embedded in the mountain range. He smashed more than 10 zhang. "Ha! It's so refreshing! If Shui Hongshan's father, Shui Hongshan will be angry." Xiaohua clapped his hands, and his divine sense swept past Shui Hongshan. He saw that although Shui Hongshan was already heavily injured, it was not enough to take his life. Xiaohua's Xiao had to do it. Xiao. Xiaohua was Zhao's as Xiao of the same. Finally, Xiaohua himself was the same. He screamed in midair and rushed into the mountain range. 7 human-shaped caves were formed at the foot of the mountain. Zhang Xian was a disciple of the Utopia faction in the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He was short and had an ordinary appearance. As a cultivator, appearance and figure were secondary. As long as your cultivation was high, who would dare to look down on you? Unfortunately, Zhang Xian's aptitude was just like his figure and appearance. He was too ordinary. When he was cultivating qi, he narrowly passed the Utopia faction's disciple selection and became a cultivator. Now that he had the conditions to cultivate, Zhang Xian was full of energy and wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. However, there were no shortcuts in cultivation. If you didn't have the aptitude, you couldn't do it. Even if you didn't sleep every day and cultivated all the time, you couldn't compare with those with good aptitude. In the Utopia faction, Li Zongbao was a typical example. Zhang Xian joined the Utopia faction with Li Zongbao. However, Li Zongbao easily reached the Foundation establishment stage, and even reached the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. Zhang Xian was still stuck at the peak of level 12 of the Qi refining stage, and couldn't reach the Foundation establishment stage for a long time. Fortunately, Zhang Xian worked hard and earned an opportunity to participate in the Feather Deity Conference. However, the result was not out of his expectations. Although he was ranked in the top 32, he was shocked again in the competition for the extraterrestrial divine object. It turned out that on the Dawn Rain continent, except for Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction, he couldn't compare with Yun Guichong of the Washed Flower sect and Hongxia Fairy. Even Xiaohua of the Imperial Thunder sect, who didn't enter the top 32, was far behind him. Needless to say, he retreated helplessly in the face of Yun Guichong's magic weapon. Needless to say, he was extremely surprised by Hongxia Fairy's betrayal. Needless to say, Yun Guichong and Hongxia Fairy had both reached the peak of the Qi refining stage, and only wanted to reach the completion of the Qi refining stage with the help of the soul accumulation talisman. He just remembered that he had seen Xiaohua's amazing strength with his own eyes. He actually took out the Great Wisdom Sword. His heart had been trembling for more than 10 years. How could there be such a big difference between people? This thought, even after he had reached the Foundation establishment stage, it still lingered in his heart. Even when the Great War of Tao cultivators began, he, who hadn't broken through the Foundation establishment stage for a long time, was selected to join the expedition together with Yang Fangqing. He still didn't get rid of this thought. However, 5 years ago, he suddenly woke up. Yes, there is such a big difference between people. Opportunities are always different. However, no matter what the difference is, no matter what the opportunity is, as long as one is alive, there is a chance. This was because Yang Fangqing, who had been sent to the expedition together with him, had died in the Battle of Mount Quanjin. Not even his corpse was left behind. Thinking of Yang Fangqing, Zhang Xian felt a little sad. Yang Fangqing's experience was very similar to his. The two of them had even participated in the Feather Immortal conference together. This time, the two of them were together in the expedition. However, Yang Fangqing was more mature than Zhang Xian. He didn't complain as much as Zhang Xian. He just cultivated diligently. After hearing the news of Yang Fangqing's death, the first thing Zhang Xian did was to apply for a mission from the deacon. He was to bring his team of 9 disciples to patrol Mount Quanjin, hoping to find Yang Fangqing's corpse. Of course, patrolling Mount Quanjin wasn't an easy task. Every sect had a chance, and even every team had a chance. However, Zhang Xian knew that other than himself, who sincerely wanted to find Yang Fangqing's corpse, most of the other teams were here for the magic treasures in the array. Today was the day that the Utopia faction would replace the Cool Breeze Valley team. Zhang Xian brought his team and set off a few days earlier. Just when they were a few hundred miles away from Mount Quanjin, they encountered the rupture of the array. There was an earth-shattering sound, and there was a strange phenomenon of a hurricane soaring into the sky. Even from a few hundred miles away, there was a pressure of spiritual energy fluctuations. Zhang Xian's first reaction was that there was a problem with the array of Mount Quanjin. He sent 2 of his disciples back to report the news, while he urged the rest of his disciples to follow him and rush towards Mount Quanjin. When Zhang Xian arrived within a few hundred miles of Mount Quanjin, the impact of the explosion of heaven and earth's spiritual qi had already passed. Looking at the unimaginable mess on the ground, Zhang Xian was dumbfounded. The stubbornness in his heart was instantly destroyed. There was nothing to say. Even if Yang Fangqing was alive, he wouldn't have been able to escape from the array, not to mention his corpse. "Senior Zhang! Look, there's a magic treasure over there." A Foundation establishment stage disciple didn't think as much as Zhang Xian. He used his spiritual will to scan the area and found a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy. He shouted happily, "Oh? Indeed!" Zhang Xian used his spiritual will to scan the area and understood that the magic treasure in the array was blown here by the explosion of heaven and earth's spiritual qi. "Hurry!" Zhang Xian said anxiously. "The array is damaged. I'm afraid there won't be any cultivators or swordsmen within a few hundred miles. We are the first batch to arrive here. These magic treasures are what we want to find. It's also our great contribution." "Yes, this disciple understands." The others were overjoyed. Without waiting for Zhang Xian's urging, they hurriedly used their flying techniques and released their spiritual will. They searched the ground inch by inch and began their treasure-hunting journey. The magic treasures and flying swords of tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen were definitely a terrifying number. Although Xiaohua took a lot, there was still a lot left in the array. However, although there were many things, if the array exploded, the items would be like fried beans. They would scatter everywhere and scatter in the space of a few hundred miles. It really wasn't easy to find them. Zhang Xian and the others searched for more than half a day and only found a dozen magic treasures and flying swords. Of course, they couldn't be compared to Xiaohua. They were already beaming with joy when they saw so many things. As for Zhang Xian, after searching for more than half a day, he only saw magic treasures deeply embedded in the mountain walls. He didn't see any bones or the like. He already knew that it was impossible to find Yang Fangqing's corpse. His thoughts were also extinguished. "Senior Yang! It's not that this little brother didn't try his best, but this is really too difficult. I'm afraid that senior brother's corpse has already turned into ashes and scattered between heaven and earth. Even if this little brother saw it, he would be powerless to do anything." Zhang Xian and the other disciples gradually pushed forward, but he still secretly muttered in his heart, "Of course, if senior brother really has a spirit in the netherworld, tell this little brother where the bones are buried and this little brother will definitely." While Zhang Xian was thinking, his eyes swept across the foothills. On the foothills, there were traces of 7 human figures. Ah! Zhang Xian couldn't help but exclaim. Could it be that senior brother Yang's spirit is manifesting? Immediately, he swept the area with his spiritual will and shouted. Disciples, quickly, there are people in the foothills. Yes. These people still have a chance to live. The disciples heard Zhang Xian's call and all gathered around. They swept the area with their spiritual will and saw the situation of Xiao Hua and the others clearly. How did they get embedded in the stone walls? Xiao Hua and the others' Taoist robes were all damaged and their faces were covered. Zhang Xian couldn't see clearly, but he could vaguely see that the 7 people weren't wearing the Taoist robes of the Utopia faction. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. As he spoke, he followed the traces of the 7 people in the stone walls and looked in the direction of Jinquan Mountain. -8. Chapter 2377. These 7 people came from the direction of Mt Qianjin's array. Zhang Xian immediately understood and shouted. They are the disciples of the patrol team in front of us. Quickly save them! Hearing this, everyone hurriedly took action. Using magic tools and other methods, they pulled Xiao Hua and the others out from the foothills. Damn it, can't they be a little more gentle? Xiao Hua closed his eyes and cursed inwardly. He directly pulled me out with a rope. If it weren't for my thick skin, I would have been injured by this pull. I don't even know how to save people. Senior brother Zhang, these 7 people are on their last breaths. Seeing the state of the 7 people, a disciple hurriedly said, We have some pills in our storage pouches, but there aren't many. That's not right, senior brother Zhang. This is Imperial Thunder Sect's robe. These 7 people are Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. Another quick-witted disciple discovered. The patrolling disciples in front of us are from Cool Breeze Valley. Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? 7 people? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up and he hurriedly looked over. When he saw Xiao Hua's face, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. That's right, it's Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples. This guy is Xiao Hua. I recognize these 7 people. They are the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who fell in the Battle of Mt Qianjin. They actually didn't die. Quick, don't care about the pills. Quickly give them to them. We must preserve their lives. This is a greater contribution than magic treasures. Yes, this disciple understands. When the disciple who was stingy with the pills heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately took out healing pills from his storage pouch and put one into the mouths of Xiao Hua and the others. After everyone had taken the pills, Zhang Xian's heart was slightly relieved. He looked around and pointed to the cave that Xiao Hua had used before and said, These 7 people are seriously injured and can't be moved for the time being. We will first put them in the cave and leave one person to guard it. The others will follow I to search inside. Yes, this disciple understands. The group of disciples then hurriedly threw the 7 people into the cave. That crude force was only slightly inferior to when Xiao Hua threw the 6 people into the stone wall. This is really karma. Xiao Hua was speechless as he enjoyed the treatment of being thrown away. Fortunately, the disciples of the Utopia faction were well-mannered. They placed the 7 people in different places, lying on their backs instead of piling them together. After making arrangements for Xiao Hua and the others, Zhang Xian once again left behind an early-stage Foundation establishment disciple, while the others once again headed towards the Golden Spring Mountain Range. After another 3 to 4 days, the spiritual energy explosion at Mount Qianjin finally attracted cultivators and swordsmen. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mount Qianjin, human figures began to appear. At this moment, Zhang Xian and the rest had already arrived near the Golden Spring Mountain Range. At the same time, they could also see the huge crater in the Golden Spring Mountain Range. Facing such a huge crater, Zhang Xian was even more speechless. He could easily imagine the scene when the array collapsed. That unstoppable ferocity. Naturally, he thought of Xiao Hua, who was lucky enough to survive. Sigh, why is there such a big difference between people? This sentence flashed into his mind again. Zhang Xian and the other disciples of the Utopia faction searched the crater in Golden Spring Mountain for a day and found a lot of magic treasures and the remains of magic treasures. When a cultivator's divine thought swept across the crater, Zhang Xian immediately left with the disciples vigilantly. They had already gained enough. It was not worthwhile to have any more conflicts with others and even lose their lives. When Zhang Xian and the rest returned to the cave, the two people he sent to deliver the message had also returned from the teleportation device. Following closely behind were a few guards from the Sky Patrol City. They were also shocked that Xiao Hua and the rest were still alive. An hour after Zhang Xian returned, Xiao Hua, Cui Hongshan and the rest also woke up one after another. When he saw Zhang Xian and the rest, Cui Hongshan was stunned and hurriedly said, Where is this? Is the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine still in the hands of the Taoist faction? Xiao Hua was also stunned. Looking at the somewhat familiar face of Zhang Xian, he hesitated and said, Are you, fellow cultivator Zhang from the Utopia faction? He, junior brother Xiao, of course it's me. Zhang Xian looked at Xiao Hua's almost unchanged face and said with a smile, I am Zhang Xian, who participated in the Taiqing Sect's Feather Deity Conference. After not seeing each other for decades, I look old, but junior brother Xiao is still as youthful as ever. Sigh, it's nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked at Cui Hongshan and asked again. Senior brother Zhang, where is this? Is this the Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine? What happened to me and the rest? Junior brother Xiao. Zhang Xian looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Cui Hongshan and the rest, who were confused, and said with a smile, This must be Captain Cui Hongshan, right? Cui Hongshan nodded and said, That's me, senior brother Zhang from the Utopia faction, nice to meet you. It's a long story about Golden Spring Mountain. I won't explain it in detail here. We'll return to the Sky Patrol City now. On the way, I'll explain it slowly. Zhang Xian thought for a while and said, Okay. Xiao Hua nodded, but Cui Hongshan frowned and said, Senior brother Zhang, what happened to Golden Spring Mountain? Why are we here? And we just recovered from our injuries? Zhang Xian laughed softly. The Golden Spring Mountain spiritual stone mine no longer exists. As for how Brother Cui got injured, I don't know. However, when I saw all of you, your lives were hanging by a thread. Fortunately, although your injuries are serious, they're all on the skin and flesh. Your meridians and dantian are still intact. You'll naturally recover in these few days. Fellow Taoists, you are all lucky. Sigh, thinking about some of our friends. As he spoke, Zhang Xian's face paled. Oh? Xiao Hua understood and said softly, Senior brother Zhang, senior brother Yang Fangqing, it seems like, junior brother Xiao has met senior brother Yang before, right? Yes, and senior brother He Fan Yuan from Taiqing sect, and senior brother Kuxingxi from Kunlun sect, they're all old friends of mine. Sigh, only senior brother He Fan Yuan was lucky enough to escape from Golden Spring Mountain and has returned to Taiqing sect now. Zhang Xian sighed. I only heard about him 5 years ago. I haven't heard about him for the past few years. 5 years ago? Senior brother Zhang, what do you mean? Jin Minghui was baffled and asked unconsciously. Ha! Zhang Xian stood up and said, Let's go. Now that Golden Spring Mountain's formation has unexpectedly exploded, it attracted many cultivators and swordsmen. We should hurry back to Sentry City. Golden Spring Mountain's formation? What's going on? Cui Hongshan was puzzled. But immediately, his face showed a trace of shock as he looked at Jin Minghui. Senior brother Minghui, the formation that senior brother Zhang mentioned, is it that layer of restriction? It should be. Jin Minghui raised his head and looked at Xiao Hua. Junior brother Xiao, what do you think? Sigh, it should be. Xiao Hua's face was also extremely confused. It seems that at that time, there was a sword cultivator chasing after us, and an incomparably huge force pushed us towards the restriction. Little brother's vision turned black, and I don't know anything. Zhenhua, what about you? Xiao Hua turned around and asked Jinhua. Jinhua was stunned and nodded hurriedly like a chick pecking at rice. Yes, yes. I also remember this. My vision turned black. When I opened my eyes, I was in the cave and saw my fellow cultivators from the Utopia faction. I guess this is the reason why Senior Brother Zhang said we were unconscious for 5 years? Xiao Hua's face was full of realization. What? We were unconscious for 5 years? At this time, Cui Hongshan, Jin Minghui and the rest suddenly understood. Let's talk about it on the way. At this time, they had already flown out of the cave. Zhang Xian's divine thought swept over them and urged them. Golden Spring Mountain was far from Century City. In the past 5 years, the war had been in a stalemate, and the country of Shi had advanced a lot. Hence, there were more sword cultivators near Golden Spring Mountain. At this time, the cultivators from Century City had not arrived, but the sword cultivators had arrived first. Xiao Hua and the rest had recovered from their injuries, but the injuries on their meridians could not be healed quickly. They could not fly fast, so they could only be carried by the disciples of the Utopia faction. After flying for a day in the direction of Century City, they did not fly too far. And on this day, Cui Hongshan and the rest thoroughly understood everything that had happened at Quanjin Mountain. After hearing about the tragic battle at Golden Spring Mountain, Cui Hongshan, who was in the middle of it, could not help but change his expression. They were in the restrictive spell at that time and did not know about the killing outside. At this time, when they heard about it, they could not help but have goosebumps and feel lucky. Naturally, Zhang Xian and the rest also knew why Cui Hongshan and the rest could survive. It was because they had set up a defense in the spiritual stone mine and were responsible for attacking the swordsmen who went deep into the spiritual stone mine. When the spell was activated, they were being chased by the swordsmen and just happened to escape to the edge of the spell. That was because the spell had not been fully formed. With the help of the spiritual howl, they were embedded in the edge of the spell. It was also because of this that they escaped the attack of the spiritual howl and escaped with their lives. When the spell collapsed, they were thrown out of the spell of Golden Spring Mountain along with the spiritual howl and shot straight into the foothills of the mountain. Oh my God! The 9 people of the Utopia faction were fascinated by the story. This was simply the legendary fortune. This was something that could not be encountered even in 1,000,000 years. What a coincidence! How could they have encountered it? However, they had no choice but to believe it. If they did not manage to gather all the swordsmen together? How could they, who were only in the foundation establishment stage, survive the spiritual howl? That was the fall of 30 Golden Core stage swordsmen. Seeing Cui Hongshan and the rest's solemn expressions, as well as their expressions of relief and fear, Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief. Damn it, if even these words cannot be deceived, then I have no other way. Xiao Hua thought to himself. Oh yes, I have a small matter to ask. Cui Hongshan thought for a moment, and asked softly. Please ask, my friend Cui. Zhang Xian was rather courteous. He was clear that although Cui Hongshan did not contribute in the battle at Golden Spring Mountain, these 7 people were still survivors and must be heavily rewarded. That? How are the other 3 people from the Imperial Thunder sect doing? Cui Hongshan looked at Zhang Xian carefully, afraid that there would be some bad news. To be continued. -8. Chapter 2378. Oh, about that, Zhang Xian said with a smile. In the Battle of Golden Spring Mountain, there were 17 survivors from my sect. Among them were 3 female cultivators from the Imperial Thunder sect. They were also rewarded. As for what happened in these 5 years, I don't know. Thank you, fellow cultivator Zhang. Cui Hongshan was overjoyed. But then, his face showed a trace of loneliness. He looked up at the sky and said, Alas, 5 years passed in a flash. My glory is like a song. Damn it, the disciples of a cultivation family are so arrogant. Xiao Hua sneered disdainfully. It's a pity that 5 years are gone for no reason. Cui Hongshan flew with the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction. He didn't use his magic power. At this moment, he sighed in his heart and endured the pain. However, as soon as he started to use the heart technique, he was stunned. Seeing the astonishment on Cui Hongshan's face as he stopped his cocky fart, Xiaohua was still bewildered. Without waiting for him to carefully ponder over it, Jinhua and Baisugu, who were behind him, cried out in alarm. Martial Uncle Xiao Jr. Jr. is about to build his foundation. Ah? Building his foundation? Building his foundation now? Xiaohua was also taken aback. He hurriedly swept his divine sense over. Wasn't that the case? Jinhua and Baisugu's bodies were flashing with brilliance. Their divine senses were in a state of being released, and the pressure of the foundation establishment stage was gradually emerging. Wasn't this the state of foundation establishment? Why are you building your foundation here? Zhang Xian was shocked. Building one's foundation must attract the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If it was a normal day, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, they were in the vicinity of Golden Spring Mountain, which was very sensitive. It would definitely attract the attention of cultivators and swordsmen. If it was cultivators, they would leave. But how could swordsmen let you build your foundation safely? Do you want to use the soul accumulation talisman? Xiaohua knew it was inappropriate, and hurriedly asked. Jinhua and Baisugu looked at each other. Their eyes were full of bitterness. They had cultivated bitterly for more than 10 years and finally built their foundation. If they used the soul accumulation talisman, who knew if they couldn't build their foundation? They couldn't be compared with those disciples with heavenly aptitudes. However, if they didn't use the soul accumulation talisman, they understood the danger of this place from Zhang Xian's tone. Forget it! Jinhua smiled bitterly. I am willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Disciple 2! Baisugu also cupped his fists and said, Is that so? Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out 2 accumulating spirit talismans. Are you willing to do this? We. Jinhua and Baisugu gritted their teeth and said, We are willing to use the soul accumulation talisman. Ha! Xiaohua laughed heartily. He clapped his hands and put the accumulating spirit talisman into his bag. He laughed and said, Since you don't want to use it, then don't use it. You don't have to force it. With your martial Uncle Xiao overseeing this place, who can stop the 2 of you from reaching foundation establishment? Go! As Xiaohua spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the 2 by their necks. His figure flew up and flew toward 2 mountain peaks not too far away. Xiaohua! Zhang Xian called out from behind. Let them use the accumulating spirit talisman. If they attract sword cultivators, we won't be able to keep our lives. Senior Martial Brother Zhang, if you're scared, feel free to leave. Xiaohua joked as he flew. I have a junior who wants to build his foundation. How can I not look after him? Whoever dares to disturb the foundation establishment of my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, I'll kill whoever comes, kill whoever comes. Ha! Alas, let's go! How could Zhang Xian leave? With a wave of his hand, the disciples of the Utopia faction led Cui Hongshan and the others to chase after Xiaohua. The disciples of the Utopia faction were a little embarrassed. They felt that Xiaohua was too accommodating to Jinhua and Baisugu. After all, they still had 2 accumulating spirit talismans. It wouldn't be too late for them to build their foundation after flying for a few days and greeting the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City. Now that they were building their foundation here, it was definitely a big bait. If they didn't attract sword cultivators, it would be absolutely impossible. At the thought of these 2 absolutes, the disciples of the Utopia faction gritted their teeth in hatred. Instead of accompanying 2 chi refining disciples to build their foundation here and meeting sword cultivators, it would be better to go to Mount Quanjin to pick up more magic weapons and snatch more magic weapons from sword cultivators. Although Xiaohua suppressed his flying speed, he was still faster than the others. By the time Zhang Xian and the others arrived at the mountain peak, Xiaohua had already made arrangements for Jinhua. He then brought Baisu Valley to another mountain peak. Junior Brother Xiao, I'll accompany you to look after this disciple. How about letting the other disciples and junior brother Chui go over there to look after the other disciples? Zhang Xian saw that Xiao Hua could fly so fast after being injured, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He only knew that Xiao Hua had infinite strength. That's good. Xiao Hua looked at Jinhua, who was only 200 feet away from him, and nodded. You and the others take. Zhang Xian was just about to instruct when Xiao Hua smiled and said, How about this, fellow cultivator Chui and the others, stay here and ask the disciples of the Utopia faction to look after them. Thank you. Okay. Zhang Xian nodded and turned to instruct. You and the others go over. Although the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect are only in the Foundation establishment stage, they are also the heroes of Jinshan Quan. You and the others have to protect them even if you have to give up your lives. Otherwise, we'll be ashamed of them who escaped from death. Senior brother, a disciple of the Foundation establishment stage, said unhappily. We're here to patrol Jinshan Quan. If we were to escort the fellow cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect back to the Sky Patrol City, then it's our duty. We wouldn't dare to decline. But he wants to build his foundation. There's an 80 to 90% chance that he'll attract sword cultivators. I can't guarantee. Humph. Zhang Xian's face turned cold and was about to scold. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Junior brothers, just go over. Let the juniors of my family have peace of mind. You don't have to care about other things. Oh? Zhang Xian was stunned. He glanced at Xiao Hua and thought that Xiao Hua was giving him a way out. He turned to scold. Why aren't you going? Don't worry, if there are sword cultivators attacking us, how can the other cultivators not care? It's not like there's no one here. The number of cultivators is not less than the number of swordsmen. Yes. The disciples of the Utopia faction answered and turned to fly to the mountain where Jinhua was. However, from their feeble answers, it was obvious that they were not happy. Junior brother Xiao, please excuse us. Zhang Xian smiled apologetically. When we return to the Sky Patrol City, I'll teach them a lesson. Don't mention it. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and said, This is human nature. If they're excited and can't wait, I'll be worried. Ha ha ha, junior brother Xiao is still so interesting. No wonder. Hong Xia Fairy favors you. Zhang Xian laughed. At this time, on the two mountain peaks, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth began to gather. Jinhua and Baisu Valley's divine thought gradually released. The pressure of the cultivators of the Foundation establishment stage gradually grew stronger, and gradually spread to the surroundings with the two mountain peaks as the center. Not bad. Zhang Xian saw the situation and said softly, Junior brother Xiao, the foundation of these two juniors of yours is excellent. The power of the Foundation establishment stage is very strong. They're the best among the disciples of the Foundation establishment stage that I have seen. They're the best among the best? Xiao Hua secretly curled his lips. Compared to him, the movement of the Foundation establishment stage was really not worth mentioning. However, he still smiled and nodded, with the demeanor of an elder. Yes, these two disciples' foundation is very good. It's just that they haven't had the opportunity to build their Foundation establishment stage. Therefore, when they saw the condensation of true essence, they were ecstatic and wanted to build their Foundation establishment stage. It's understandable. Zhang Xian nodded. Back then, we fought to the death in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Wasn't it because we wanted to build our Foundation establishment stage? Junior brother Xiao didn't build his Foundation establishment stage, but he also obtained a treasure and even accidentally obtained a beauty's heart. I really didn't get anything. After returning to the sect for a long time, I barely built my Foundation establishment stage. To tell you the truth, I had the same thoughts as these two young friends at that time. I was ecstatic and hurriedly took the Foundation establishment pill without caring about anything else. What divine accumulation pill! What great perfection of chi refinement! Let them go to hell! Ha! Xiao Hua also laughed. You're lucky. I actually failed to build my Foundation establishment stage for the first time, and it took me a long time to build my foundation establishment stage for the second time. Therefore, when I saw these two juniors in a hurry to build their foundation establishment stage, I empathized with them and did my best to help them build their foundation establishment stage. Yes. Zhang Xian nodded, but he still said, "It's just that these two juniors' luck is a bit bad. This is not a good place, and there are many disciples who were building their foundation establishment stage who died in the hands of sword cultivators. It's better for us to be careful." "Yes, I understand. Actually, we should have put the two of them together." Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Jinhua in the distance, and the disciples of the Utopia faction sitting cross-legged next to him. If we separated them, they wouldn't affect each other, but if there were swordsmen attacking, it would be a bit difficult. "Yes, I know." Xiaohua still didn't express his opinion. Seeing that Xiaohua had said so, Zhang Xian didn't say anything more. He released his divine thought and carefully took precautions. Jinhua and Baisugu suddenly building their foundation establishment stage made Xiaohua very surprised. After all, they had been in a coma for the past 5 years. What made him even more puzzled was that Cui Hongshan, Jin Mingwei, Su Qing and Qiu Su also wanted to interfere. They actually sat there and started to circulate their heart sutras slowly. Damn it, can't they circulate their heart sutras? Why do they have to do it here? Isn't this snatching the spiritual qi from the foundation establishment stage disciples? Xiaohua despised Cui Hongshan, even though there were 4 foundation establishment stage cultivators here and the 4 of them only carefully absorbed a small amount of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Jinhua and Baisugu's foundation establishment stage phenomenon indeed attracted the attention of the crowd. Some cultivators rushed over happily. When they scanned with their divine thought, they found out that it was 2 juniors building their foundation establishment stage. They were disappointed but also helpless. Those with good self-restraint turned around and left. Those with bad self-restraint cursed a few words in the air and even spat. Of course, they wouldn't interfere with the two's foundation establishment stage. After all, they were all sword cultivators of the Dao faction. They still understood this principle. If the cultivators came, would the swordsmen be far away? Immediately, several swordsmen came together. Of course, when they saw that the 2 disciples building their foundation establishment stage were guarded by several foundation establishment stage cultivators, although they had malicious intentions, they also resentfully turned around and left. Instead of wasting time here, it would be better to quickly find a flying sword. -8. Chapter 2379. Unfortunately, after the time it took to finish a meal, Jinhua and Baisu Valley's good luck came to an end. From the direction of Quanjing Mountain, there were about 20 third-grade swordsmen with their swords drawn. Their faces were filled with panic as they hurriedly flew over. While flying, they kept looking behind them. When one of them saw the phenomenon of Jinhua and Baisu Valley's foundation building, he was overjoyed and hurriedly transmitted his voice to the other swordsmen. Those 20 swordsmen excitedly flew over. Not good! When these swordsmen flew closer, Zhang Xian noticed and hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Cui, have you all adjusted your breath? There are 20 swordsmen coming over!" Xiaohua had already seen them and didn't care at all. Seeing Zhang Xian's panic, he smiled and said, "No need to delay these people's cultivation. It's rare for them to be so hard-working. Senior brother Zhang, you go over there and stay with the fellow cultivators from the Utopia faction." This? Zhang Xian was somewhat hesitant. Xiaohua was still smiling. "Senior brother Zhang, it's better to stay with your own disciples. Otherwise, if there's any mishap, you won't be able to explain it to the assembly hall." "All right." Zhang Xian knew that Xiaohua's words were reasonable and said in a low voice, "If junior brother Xiao feels that something is wrong, quickly bring the disciples over. With us together, we won't be afraid of them." "And I know." Xiaohua nodded. After Zhang Xian flew over, Xiaohua turned to look at the place where the swordsman flew. It was less than 3 miles away. At this time, Cui Hongshan stood up from the ground and frowned. 20 swordsmen, it's a bit tricky. And you'd better cultivate diligently, Xiaohua said sarcastically. There's someone building foundation here. The spiritual energy here is very rich. You. Cui Hongshan didn't expect Xiaohua to look at him like this and was slightly angry. However, he didn't bother to explain to Xiaohua. Hee, junior brother Xiao. Jin Minghui also stood up and said happily. I'm afraid you've misunderstood Captain Cui. What did I misunderstand? Xiaohua naturally wouldn't admit it. Hee, I'll let junior brother Xiao know, Jin Minghui said in a low voice. I just checked my meridians and heart technique. I'm not talented. Although I don't have any impression of these 5 years, but these 5 years are worth 10 years of hard cultivation. What? Xiaohua was extremely surprised. He knocked out the 6 of them and threw them into the space. He didn't expect that as soon as they came out, 2 of them were about to enter the Foundation establishment realm, and 4 of them had made great progress in their cultivation. What had his space become? On the other side, Su Qing and Chiu Su stood up as well. Similarly, their faces lit up with joy. They smiled and said, That's right, we've also checked. Our cultivation has indeed improved. We know that if we cultivate diligently for a few years, or even less than a year, we will be able to step into the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. You too? Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and looked at Cui Hongshan. I don't know, Cui Hongshan replied indifferently. Whether or not it is love. Xiaohua curled his lips. This Xiao is too lazy to care. What about you? Junior brother Xiao? Su Qing blinked and asked. Don't tell me you didn't make any progress? Me? Of course I do. Xiaohua also couldn't deny it. Then, he rolled his eyes and said with a profound look. Just now, this Xiao thought about it. I thought it was just this Xiao's own situation and didn't dare to ask you. I reckon, it might be because we were inside the restriction. Although that spiritual hall couldn't attack us, but the spiritual chi of heaven and earth could also seep into the restriction of the Great Formation. Although we were unconscious, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth still entered our meridians and pushed our cultivation. That's right, that's right. Fear appeared on Jin Minghui's face. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth could actually rush into a person's meridians and cause a swordsman's body to explode. It could definitely pass through the restriction of the formation and enter our meridians. Fortunately, there was a great formation that blocked the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, otherwise we would have already turned into ashes. Seeing that Jin Minghui was able to lie so perfectly, Xiaohua felt proud in his heart. While everyone was talking, the 20 sword cultivators had already flown to the center of the mountain with bared fangs and brandished claws. They scanned with their divine senses and stopped again. Their faces were filled with shame and anger, knowing that they had pounced on empty air. But immediately these sword cultivators discussed a little, and with a sinister smile on their faces, they all pounced towards Xiaohua's side. After all, the number of people on Xiaohua's side was small. Can you still face the enemy? Xiaohua turned his head and asked. If you can't, then just stay here. Our meridians are only slightly torn, it's nothing. Why can't we face the enemy? Cui Hongshan knew Xiaohua's ability, but now that his cultivation had improved greatly, his heart was jumping with joy. He didn't want Xiaohua to monopolize the limelight. All right, then this Xiao won't stop you. Xiaohua stretched and said. However, this Xiao will need the time to drink a cup of tea to kill these sword cultivators. During this time, I won't have time to take care of you. Good boy, only the time to drink a cup of tea. Su Qing secretly stuck out her tongue. I know. We are not 3-year-old children. Cui Hongshan secretly laughed at Xiaohua's showing off. All right. At this time, those sword cultivators were less than 100 feet away from Xiaohua and the others. 20 flying swords had already flown over. Xiaohua and the others each had a flying sword aimed at them, and the remaining 10 or so flying swords were actually aimed at Baisu Valley. Baisu Valley's divine sense was released and had long seen it clearly. He couldn't help but feel a little unstable. I'm here, what are you afraid of? Xiao Hua had been keeping his Buddhist consciousness near Baisu Valley. Seeing the speed of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowing into his body slow down, he knew something was wrong. With a loud shout, his figure suddenly rushed towards the sword cultivators. And as Xiao Hua flew out of the mountain peak, the cloud-suppressing seal was summoned by Xiao Hua. Once the cloud-suppressing seal came out of the space, it immediately became 10 feet in size. However, Xiao Hua controlled the cloud-suppressing seal and didn't absorb too much spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Attack! Xiao Hua roared and pointed his finger. The cloud-suppressing seal whistled and flew towards the 20 or so flying swords attacking. A powerful confining force gushed out from the cloud-suppressing seal. Many sword cultivators felt as if their flying swords were being grasped by a pair of big hands, forcibly trying to break free from their control. Ah! The sword cultivators were greatly alarmed. They hurriedly formed a sword art and urged their sword origin, wanting to snatch their flying swords out of this unremarkable magic weapon. But at this moment, the sword cultivators only saw a golden light flash before their eyes. Immediately after, a series of blood-curdling screams rang out. Far away on another mountain peak, Zhang Xian was abnormally anxious. When he saw that there were 20 li of sword cultivators, he already wanted to combine the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction and the Imperial Thunder faction to fight the enemy together. Therefore, when he flew away, he specially warned Xiao Hua. When he saw the 20 or so swordsmen rushing towards Xiao Hua, he felt lucky in his heart but didn't dare to move. He was afraid that he would fall for the sword cultivator's trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Instead, he hoped that Xiao Hua would quickly bring Baisu Valley and the others over. But who knew that Xiao Hua actually had the leisure to chat with Cui Hongshan and the others over there? -8. Chapter 2380. Just as Zhang Xian was pondering whether he should bring the disciples over to rescue them, Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal appeared. Zhang Xian had heard of this cloud-suppressing seal before and knew that it was a powerful magic treasure that Xiao Hua had obtained by chance during the Feather Immortal assembly. However, seeing that the cloud-suppressing seal did not have much of a magic treasure's power, he thought that Xiao Hua was barely able to activate it. He was extremely anxious in his heart. Before he could call out to the other disciples, his figure flew up, wanting to rush to the rescue. But at this moment, he discovered something strange, because the dozen flying swords that were flying towards Baisu Valley had actually changed their trajectory, and were rushing towards the cloud-suppressing seal. Just as he was pondering whether the flying swords were purposely blocked by the cloud-suppressing seal, an unforgettable scene appeared. Xiao Hua slapped his hand and a half-scissor-like magic treasure fragment suddenly appeared in his hand. Under the urging of his magic power, it emitted a faint golden light. Then, the magic treasure transformed into a flood dragon and rushed towards the sword cultivators. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the front of a 4th-grade sword cultivator. The flood dragon slightly swung its tail and swept towards the sword cultivator's neck. The sword cultivator's neck was immediately covered by a sword radiance, as if to block it. However, in just an instant, the sword radiance was annihilated. The flood dragon's tail swept past the sword cultivator and rushed towards another 3rd-grade sword cultivator behind the sword cultivator. Zhang Xian was stunned. He actually did not see clearly whether the flood dragon killed the sword cultivator or not. The 4th-grade sword cultivator, the one whose attack was said to be comparable to the late stage of Foundation establishment, screamed miserably as he fell from the sky. Even the sword cultivator's neck did not have a scar. Only when he fell a few feet did a red line appear. Zhang Xian only had time to cry out in shock. The soaring dragon scissors flashed through the sword cultivators at an incomparably fast speed, and 4 swordsmen fell from the sky. This? Zhang Xian's figure stopped in the air, and his face showed bitterness. I knew it! This Xiao Hua is definitely not an ordinary person! Zhang Xian thought to himself. Back then, why is there such a big difference between people? However, just this difference was not enough to make him unable to forget it for the rest of his life. Just as Zhang Xian saw the 4 swordsmen being killed by Xiao Hua, the other swordsmen had already sensed the power of Xiao Hua's soaring dragon scissors. Many swordsmen immediately gave up on attacking Baisu Gu and formed sword seals in their hands. The dozens of flying swords transformed into all kinds of rainbow lights that broke through the confinement of the suppressing cloud seal. They surrounded Xiao Hua from all directions and stabbed towards Xiao Hua. Zhang Xian's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the same as before. This was the combined attack of more than 10 Foundation establishment swordsmen. Who would have thought that Xiao Hua didn't care at all? He urged the transcendence energy in his hand, and the soaring dragon shears once again reaped the life of another swordsman. At the same time, the flying sword had already pierced about 3 meters into Xiao Hua's body. It seemed that the flying sword was about to pierce through his heart. When, with a buzzing sound that sounded like thousands of mosquitoes, the previously inconspicuous cloud-suppressing seal suddenly displayed its might. In an instant, it expanded to over 30 meters in size, and smashed towards the dozen or so sword cultivators at a speed that was several times faster than before. Another incomparably valiant confinement force enveloped these sword cultivators. Fall, fall, fall! Xiao Hua softly rebuked 3 times in a row. 3 streaks of bronze clouds fell from the cloud-suppressing seal, rapidly enveloping the dozen or so sword cultivators. And just as Xiao Hua was chanting an incantation, his figure suddenly swayed. With lightning speed, he broke away from the attack range of the dozen or so flying swords. The flying sword closest to him practically brushed past his ear as it flew away. Fall! Xiao Hua's expression didn't change in the slightest. He pointed his hand towards the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal that was always half a beat slower now smashed down like a boulder. With a boom, it simultaneously smashed into the bodies of the dozen or so sword cultivators that were already confined by the cloud-suppressing seal in midair. The sword cultivators' protective sword auras flickered extremely brightly, but they still couldn't compare to the brilliance of the cloud-suppressing seal. With just one touch, the dozen or so sword cultivators around the 4th grade were all smashed into meat paste, falling from midair. At this moment, Xiao Hua seemed to be even busier than before. With a wave of his hand, the dozen or so flying swords that had just flown past him fell into his hand. With a wave of his hand, he stored them into his space. Immediately after, he didn't stop to rest. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he flew into midair and also collected the storage pouches of the dozen or so sword cultivators. Only then did he clap his hands and return once again. And at this time, the sword cultivators that were preparing to kill Cui Hongshan and the other 3 had just begun to exchange blows with Cui Hongshan and the others. Zhang Xian was really dumbstruck. His body swayed, and he nearly fell from midair. This is a sword cultivator whose strength is comparable to that of the Foundation establishment stage. This is at least 20 cultivators in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage. How could he kill them so easily? Zhang Xian was somewhat confused. He very naturally turned his head to look at the other disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction. Obviously, those disciples were also standing on the foot of the mountain, allowing the mountain wind to blow their lapels up. It was as if Xiao Hua had set off a huge wave in their hearts. I remember that year Xiao Hua hadn't entered the top 32, right? It seems that year, when he entered the arena, he lost to his senior sister from the same sect. It seems that his cultivation at that time wasn't as strong as I. All kinds of thoughts came one after another, like a wild horse raising its wild hooves, trampling on Zhang Xian's head until it was muddled. 2 magic treasures. Suddenly, Zhang Xian seemed to understand something. Xiao Hua actually controlled 2 magic treasures, and these 2 magic treasures were both powerful. One attracted the sword cultivator's attention, the other killed the sword cultivator. Alas, even if I have 2 magic treasures, how can I use them? Definitely. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up again. Of these 2 magic treasures, there must be something strange about one of them. Letting Zhang Xian make wild guesses, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the soaring dragon's scissors disappeared into his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal made a slight rumbling sound, and flew to Cui Hongshan and the other's side. Cui Hongshan and Jin Minghui's magic power had indeed improved greatly. The thunder beads and other magic treasures in their hands were even more powerful than before. On the other hand, the four swordsmen, although they were also about the third grade of the drawing sword stage, and their strength was comparable to the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, seeing nearly 20 swordsmen killed by Xiaohua in one move, their hearts had long been trembling. While fighting Cui Hongshan and the others, they still stole glances at Xiaohua, fearing that this killing god would be unhappy and take out his magic treasures to take their lives. After fighting for half a cup of tea's time, seeing that he could neither win nor lose, a swordsman simply steeled his heart, merged his body with his sword, and urged his sword origin to fly in the opposite direction of Xiaohua. Cui Hongshan was precisely this cultivator's opponent. He also chased after him with all his might for more than 10 jiang, but the swordsman was so fast that he had already escaped far away. This is really a blessing from heaven. Seeing this, the other 3 swordsmen were wild with joy. They were even happier than when they picked up the flying swords of the illusory swordsmen at Mount Quanjin. And, of course, they also had to let those flying swords slip through Xiaohua's fingers. The 3 swordsmen turned around, each looking for a direction to escape with extreme speed. Jin Minghui and the others also chased for a few zhang before stopping. After all, there was still a gap, and it was impossible for them to catch up with those swordsmen. Junior brother Xiao, your cultivation is really beyond my expectations. Zhang Xian flew over, with a smile on his face, and cupped his hands. With Xiaohua's cultivation, he should be at least in the late stage of the foundation establishment stage, so he couldn't not be respectful. Hee. Where? Xiaohua pointed at the cloud-suppressing seal and said, "This little one's magic treasure is very powerful. If senior brother Zhang had this magic treasure, it would also be possible." Immediately after, he added, "Moreover, it seems that after escaping from the great array of Mount Quanjin, this little one's cultivation has made great progress." Just now, this little one was also a little surprised. "Is that so? There's such a thing?" Zhang Xian was slightly stunned. This was simply dog shit luck. After being in a coma for 5 years, not only did he become the hero of the Battle of Mount Quanjin, his cultivation also increased greatly. Who wouldn't be jealous after hearing this? And it's exactly so. Xiaohua smiled and released his pressure. And this pressure was already close to the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. Of course. Xiaohua immediately retracted his pressure, but Zhang Xian could clearly sense that he was about to enter the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. He couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth, and cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations, junior brother Xiao." "Haha, this Zhao's few senior brothers are also the same." Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. "And, congratulations, Captain Cui." Zhang Xian turned to congratulate Cui Hongshan and the others. "Humph, you're lying." Cui Hongshan despised Xiaohua in his heart. "You didn't even kill the sword cultivator that escaped from this daddy's subordinates. This is clearly cutting off this daddy's face." However, he could only smile and return the greeting with a bow, saying, "I was lucky. After another hour, Jinhua and Baisu Gu's foundation establishment stage finally came to an end. Those blind sword cultivators finally didn't come looking for trouble. However, Xiaohua was a little unhappy, and muttered to himself, "Damn it, with such a big foundation establishment stage movement, how could no one come to deliver a storage pouch? You really made this daddy worry for nothing." Seeing that Jinhua and Baisu Gu had retracted their divine wills, the pressure of the early foundation establishment stage also gradually receded. The surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth also gradually dissipated. At this moment, the sky also darkened. Above the horizon, the stars were shining brightly, each guarding a corner of the horizon, decorating the night sky. The twinkling starlight was like everyone's unconcealable joy. "Congratulations, junior brother Bai." Xiao Hua looked at Bai Sugu with a smile and said. Bai Sugu couldn't hide the joy on his face. He bit his lips slightly and bowed. I dare not. In front of Uncle Xiao, I'll always be a junior. If Uncle Xiao didn't show off your invincible power just now, how could I build my foundation establishment stage? Junior thanks Marshal Uncle Xiao. Ha ha ha, there's no need. You still have to thank the senior brothers who built their foundation establishment stage. Since you've built your foundation establishment stage, you have to leave the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect and return to the Imperial Thunder Sect. This battle's life and death has nothing to do with you. Xiao Hua laughed. Next, I'll send you back to Sky Patrol City safely, and everything will be fine. Yes, I understand. I'll remember Uncle Zhao's great kindness in my heart. Bai Sugu said respectfully, then turned to thank Cui Hongshan and the others. At this moment, Zhenhua also flew over and kowtowed to thank him. The disciples of the Utopia faction stood slightly further away, their eyes filled with respect, and there was no longer the previous neglect and dissatisfaction. -8. Chapter 2381. When Zhenhua and Bai Sugu finished thanking Xiao Hua took out the storage bags of more than 10 sword cultivators. He took out less than half of the items, including 10 flying swords of average quality, and handed them to Zhen Minghui and said, These are for everyone, you can distribute them. Zhenhua and Bai Sugu should take a little more, after all, they won't have a chance in the future. Yes, I know. Zhen Minghui understood Xiao Hua's meaning and divided the items into more than 10 portions. Not only did the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect get one, but also the disciples of the Utopia faction. This? I'm sorry! Zhang Xian was obviously surprised. After all, these items were the work of Xiao Hua, who killed the sword cultivators single-handedly. It was reasonable to say that they belonged to him, so he didn't have to distribute them. Ha ha, senior brother Zhang, please take them. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, This is the rule of the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect. It was set before we entered the Sky Patrol City, so I can't disobey it. Humph, this guy still cares about the rules. Cui Hongshan muttered in his heart. He didn't want to take them, but after hearing Xiao Hua's words, he took out his storage bag and put the items in it. Then, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Zhang Xian looked at the several eager disciples beside him and accepted them with a smile. The disciples beside him were also delighted. They took the items and the flying swords and put them in their storage bags. Although they had a lot of magic weapons and flying swords in their storage bags, they had to be handed over. If they were discovered by the conference hall, it would be a big crime. What Xiao Hua took out was less than half of the items in the storage bags. It was a lot for each disciple. How could they not be happy? Should we go back now? Or rest for the night? Zhang Xian looked at the night sky and asked Xiao Hua's opinion. Xiao Hua looked at Cui Hongshan, who was looking at the bright moonlight, and said with a smile, Let's hurry back to the Sky Patrol City. The sooner we get back, the sooner I can rest assured. All right, that's what I'm thinking too. Zhang Xian naturally agreed. Then, the Utopia faction and the Thunder Control faction set off for the Sky Patrol City in a group of more than 10 people. After flying for several hours, they saw the city guards of the Sky Patrol City and the Taoist sect cultivators sent by the conference hall. They were naturally extremely surprised that Xiao Hua and the others were still alive. However, their mission this time was to snatch the magic treasures and flying swords, so they only hurriedly saw them and continued on their way. Just like the few Sky Patrol City's city guards that Zhang Xian had found earlier, they were in a hurry. Seeing that dawn was about to break in the east, a wisp of light emerged from the horizon. Everyone flew to a dangerous place. The winds here were biting cold, and the foothills were steep. From time to time, a foul stench would drift into their noses from afar. Even though everyone was flying high up in the air, they still frowned. Suddenly, Xiao Hua, who was flying in the middle, frowned and said urgently, Stop! Oh? Junior brother Xiao. Did you find something wrong? Zhang Xian, who was standing next to him, stopped the disciples of the Utopia faction flying in front of him immediately. Heh. Nothing, it seems like someone is here to deliver the storage bag again. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the foothills a few miles ahead. The foothills were covered in snow and were very high, almost under everyone's feet. There are swordsmen ambushing us. Zhang Xian raised his eyebrows and suddenly realized something. He said hurriedly, These swordsmen have learned to be cunning and often set up ambushes on the path that we cultivators must pass through. Many cultivators have fallen into their trap. These swordsmen probably know that the cultivators of the Sky Patrol City are heading to Mount Quanjin, so they set up an ambush here. Previously, there were too many cultivators, so they didn't dare to attack. If we go over, I'm afraid we'll be attacked. How many swordsmen are there? Should we take a detour? Jin Minghui released his divine thought and looked around. He couldn't find anything strange, so he asked in a low voice. Why should we take a detour? Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, You wait here for a while, I'll be back soon. Junior brother Xiao, Zhang Xian said. According to what I know, the swordsmen who set up the ambush range from dozens to hundreds. They're all used to working together, and there are even sword formations. Junior brother is brave, but there's no need to take the risk for those storage bags. Hundreds? It's only hundreds. This guy has sent thousands of swordsmen in and out, so why would he be afraid of this? Cui Hongshan secretly curled his lips, knowing that Xiaohua would definitely go. Sure enough, Xiaohua smiled and said, It's okay. I'll go take a look. If it really doesn't work, it's not too late to escape. All right. Seeing that Cui Hongshan and the rest didn't stop him, Zhang Xian felt strange and said, We'll go too. If we're too far away, we won't be able to save each other in time if something happens. Good. Xiaohua thought about it and agreed. He waved his hand and said, All of you, follow behind this Xiao. Don't go more than 10 feet. Then, Xiaohua took the lead and flew forward unhurriedly. He even stopped as he flew, and his divine sense swept over the foothills again and again, as if he was really scouting the way. When Xiaohua flew to the front of a foothill, he stopped and didn't fly forward anymore. Instead, he slapped his hand and took out the cloud-suppressing seal, which buzzed and protected himself. Then, he moved forward with ease. However, Xiaohua had only flown a few feet when the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly smashed into the foothill about 1 zhang behind him. On the foothill, a thick layer of snow covered a few pine trees. Ha, you still want to play this game with me? Xiaohua laughed, and the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly enlarged to the size of several zhang. With a loud rumble, the cloud-suppressing seal smashed into the pine tree. Under the yellow light, all the illusions were destroyed. A pale white light flickered, revealing more than 10 flying swords in a disorderly fashion. Under the flying swords, there were dozens of 4th or 5th grade swordsmen. The pitiful dozen or so sword shio who wanted to wait for Zhang Xian, Cui Hongshan, and the others to fall into the ambush before attacking, now had a pale golden color on their faces. They were all lying crookedly on the foot of the mountain. Their gazes were fixed on Cui Hongshan and the others. They had already let go of Xiaohua, who was carefully exploring the path. But they didn't expect that Xiaohua would actually turn around and throw out that inconspicuous magic weapon. That inconspicuous magic weapon was just as unexpected as Xiaohua's. It was unimaginably heavy, and that mountain-like attack instantly destroyed the formation they had covered up with great difficulty. Not only that, their flying swords suffered a heavy blow, and their primordial spirits were also shaken. Xiaohua laughed loudly and no longer moved forward. He pointed his finger without any trace of politeness. The cloud-suppressing seal rose up slightly, and then suddenly pressed down. The group of swordsmen became anxious and tried their best to circulate their sword energy. While their bodies flew in all directions, their flying swords rushed towards the cloud-suppressing seal, trying to stop it from pressing down. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had been forced to cultivate bitterly for 5 years and had already reached the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment. That kind of magical power, was simply unimaginable to them. How could they block it with their flying swords? That was simply a fool's dream. -8. Chapter 2382. Crack, crack, crack! When the two flying swords collided with the cloud-suppressing seal, the tips of the swords immediately broke. The broken swords fell to the ground, and the masters of the flying swords also spat out a mouthful of blood. Their rapidly flying figures fell, dispirited on the foothills. When the rest of the swordsmen saw this, they couldn't help but be even more shocked. They hurriedly turned their flying swords around. How could they still dare to come into contact with Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal? Humph, still want to leave? Xiaohua sneered. He pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal let out a buzzing sound again. A cloud fell from above, covering the dozen or so swordsmen who wanted to escape. Go! Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, looking at the foothills not far away. The cloud-suppressing seal fell again. He didn't believe that if he smashed these swordsmen to death, their fellow apprentices wouldn't come to rescue them. Sure enough, when Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal slowly smashed on top of the cloud, the mountain rocks not far away shook. Suddenly, 20 or so swordsmen appeared. Their faces were alarmed, and each of them urged their flying swords. Those flying swords formed a slightly larger sword formation and rushed towards Xiaohua. Ha ha! Xiaohua saw another 20 or so flying swords, and he beamed with joy. Just as he was about to release the soaring dragon shears, a swift and fierce sword chi suddenly rushed out from 3 feet below Xiaohua's body, directly stabbing towards Xiaohua's leg. Ah! Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. His divine sense very naturally swept over, but the sword chi's origin was empty. There was nothing wrong with it. What's going on? Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his body, relying on his superb flying technique to dodge. Go! Xiaohua sensed that the sword chi had disappeared. His eyes turned slightly, and he pointed with his finger. He didn't care about the sealed sword technique, and the cloud-suppressing seal swayed again, meeting the simple sword formation that was hastily formed. Rumble! There was another loud sound. The sword formation formed by 20 or so flying swords finally collided with the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal was actually somewhat crooked, and was pushed to the side. Xiaohua's body also slightly swayed. Suddenly, the swift and fierce sword chi from just now appeared again, and it was again within 2 feet. And at this time, the sword chi had already approached Xiaohua's neck. Formless sword! At this point, seeing that there was still no change in his divine sense, Xiaohua came to a realization no matter how stupid he was. However, Xiaohua wasn't shocked but delighted instead. He waved his hand and was about to execute the heaven and earth sleeve technique to envelop the sword chi. However, just as he turned around, his eyes turned again. His body moved swiftly and flew up slightly, approaching the cloud-suppressing seal. At this time, more than a dozen swordsmen appeared from other places and flew towards Cui Hongshan and the others. The 20 or so swordsmen who were blocking Xiaohua once again urged their sword energy to organize the chaotic flying swords and attack Xiaohua. That invisible sword once again disappeared from the sky. Xiaohua swept out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he still couldn't find any clues. Very good! Xiaohua secretly rejoiced in his heart. Then, he stealthily opened his left hand. Within his Dharma eye, a faint blue brilliance appeared so unique among the numerous dim sword lights. At this moment, the light blue brilliance once again landed below Xiaohua. Ayaya! Xiaohua's face revealed panic. While urging the cloud-suppressing seal to block the attacks of the 20 swordsmen, he dodged the invisible sword below him. The invisible sword was indeed strange. Seeing that Xiaohua was in a very difficult situation, it immediately gave up its previous sneak attack and actually began to aimlessly attack Xiaohua's surroundings. If Xiaohua wasn't able to see it with his Dharma eye, he would really be somewhat exhausted to deal with it. Good, now is the time! Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal was once again hit by the flying swords of a group of sword cultivators. His figure was forced to fall. The invisible sword once again stabbed towards him, but the sword chi still hadn't appeared and was still 4 feet away. "Don't hurt my Taoist disciple, I'm coming!" Right at this moment, a voice that Xiao Hua was very familiar with resounded, and then a golden light that shot into the sky flew over from afar like a golden dragon. Although that golden light hadn't yet come close, that fierce baleful aura and the sound of wind tearing through the void could be heard. "Ah! Li Zongbao!" Xiao Hua's divine sense swept and was immediately overjoyed. After the golden light, wasn't it precisely the snow-haired Li Zongbao? "Oh! Xiao Hua!" Li Zongbao released the immortal piercing whip and naturally also swept out with his divine sense. Seeing that Xiao Hua's face hadn't changed in the slightest, he was also slightly stunned. He didn't expect that a Foundation establishment cultivator who relied on a magic treasure to resist 20 drawing swordsmen would actually be the first-level chi refining cultivator he saw before. Xiao Hua's slight distraction allowed the invisible sword to come within a foot of him. The sword chi flashed and was about to pierce Xiao Hua's heart. Li Zongbao also turned pale with fright. He also didn't discover the invisible sword. However, he was really far away. Even if he reminded or used the immortal piercing whip to save him, he couldn't do it. Just as Li Zongbao was regretting in his heart, he saw Xiao Hua calmly raise his left hand slightly. At the same time, a golden light not inferior to the immortal piercing whip flashed out from Xiao Hua's right hand. That golden light flashed away, and a bamboo leaf-like jade sword appeared. It fell between Xiao Hua's left thumb and index finger. Immediately after, a sound of astonishment rang out. Not even 2 feet in front of Xiao Hua, a petite swordswoman with a drawn sword appeared. Her dainty face was filled with absolute disbelief as she looked at Xiao Hua, and her eyes were filled with pain. Because a jade-like soft hand and a lotus root-like arm were currently holding the bamboo leaf-like jade sword, and blood had just seeped out of her arm. Ouch! Seeing the female cultivator appear, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. He brushed his hand and a Wu-Tsang pill appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, the Wu-Tsang pill was easily sent into the swordsman's mouth. When he did this as smoothly as moving clouds and flowing water, he himself was a bit astonished. "Granny, when did this young master have such tender feelings for the fairer sex? I forget it. Who told this young master to be a man?" Xiao Hua couldn't help but secretly find an excuse for his actions. Once the Wu-Tsang pill entered the female swordsman's mouth, it immediately turned into a liquid that flowed down the woman's throat. The woman's almond eyes turned vertical, shocked and angry. She clearly resented Xiao Hua for using poison again. Just as she was about to circulate her energy to force the medicinal liquid out, she saw Xiao Hua send the invisible sword in front of her eyes again. He said indifferently, "Still not taking it? This?" The woman was slightly stunned. The medicinal liquid of the Wu-Tsang pill had already entered her stomach. Although the woman didn't know what kind of pill Xiao Hua gave her, she could still distinguish the medicinal fragrance of the Wu-Tsang pill. It was clearly a kind of healing pill. Seeing the invisible sword being sent back, the woman naturally raised her hand and used her uninjured left hand to receive it. Her mind didn't have any thoughts at all. Just as Xiao Hua was showing tender feelings for the fairer sex, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip had already landed near the 20-sword swordsman. The whip's shadow flickered and turned into 20 rays of light that hit the swordsman's body. Puff puff! A series of light sounds could be heard. Many swordsmen's body flashed with sword rays, and their figures were all crooked and couldn't stand steadily in midair. After all, Li Zongbao was far from being a sword cultivator, and he had split into 20 whip shadows to attack the 20-sword swordsman at the same time. Moreover, he didn't have the piercing immortal whip in his hand, so the might of this magic weapon couldn't be fully displayed. Instead, it was blocked by the swordsman's attack. Go, seeing that Xiao Hua alone was enough to make everyone drink a pot of water, and even the woman's own arm had been chopped off, and this was another white-haired cultivator she had heard of before, the woman shouted without hesitation. She was the first to circulate her sword origin, and her figure disappeared in midair. "Want to go? Ha! Then you have to leave behind your flying swords. Xiaohua very naturally returned the invisible sword to the woman and immediately regretted it. Hearing the woman's shout to retreat, he immediately laughed and circulated the cloud-suppressing seal. Those 20 flying swords were firmly suppressed by him, and those swordsmen simply couldn't move. Want to go? Quickly hand over your life. At this time, Li Zongbao had already flown over. He had already seen Xiaohua's action of returning the swords, but his face was cold, without any expression. At the same time, the piercing immortal whip flew back to his hand, and he was about to attack with magic power. Li Zongbao's reputation among sword cultivators was even greater than Xiaohua's. Moreover, he was widely known by the swordsmen. Seeing this situation, they couldn't help but panic. How could they dare to stay any longer? They anxiously fled into the distance like stray dogs. So much so that, in the foothills 100 zhang away, several groups of swordsmen appeared and fled without fighting. Humph! Seeing the swordsmen fleeing, Li Zongbao's gaze swept over, and precisely saw the 10 people imprisoned by Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal. With a cold snort, he swung the piercing immortal whip. With a rumbling sound of wind and thunder, that wave-like whip's shadow rolled over, and mercilessly smashed down. Even Xiaohua somewhat couldn't bear to see the 10 swordsmen being smashed into meat paste. Humph, soft-hearted! Li Zongbao put away the piercing immortal whip and coldly said, "That woman used the famous invisible sword, named Guyu. Who knows how many Dao sect disciples have died in her hands? You, on the other hand, not only did you not take her life, you actually returned the invisible sword to her. This seems to be different from your hobby." As he spoke, Li Zongbao glanced at the 20 flying swords under the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua's face slightly reddened. Just now, it was purely a natural reaction, without any thought. However, since he had already returned it, how could he have the nerve to take it back? He could only vent his anger on the 20 sword cultivators' flying swords. Junior, is somewhat soft-hearted. Xiaohua didn't hide it, and said in a low voice. In his eyes, this Li Zongbao was a senior, and he didn't care how Li Zongbao looked at him. Junior? Your cultivation is almost at the middle stage of foundation establishment. You can just call me senior brother, Li Zongbao coldly said. Moreover, this magic treasure of yours is also not bad. Just now, I thought I had encountered some outstanding talent. Xiaohua embarrassedly laughed again and put away the cloud-suppressing seal. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior brotherly, you should take a look. Isn't this the junk I obtained at the Taiching Sect's Feather Immortal Assembly? How can it compare to senior brother's magic treasure?" TSK. Li Zongbao curled his lips. If it was someone else, he definitely wouldn't say anything, but Xiaohua was different from others. This magic treasure has been repaired quite a bit, and its power is close to that of my immortal whip. Just now, what was the magic treasure you used to cut that woman in half? This poor Taoist actually didn't see it clearly. -8. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.